of stage one. There's a great shot of exactly what the riders are doing and seeing there at Mont-Saint-Michel. Well, we are excited, just as we've had the last 30 years of watching the Tour de France, to have the voices and the insights of Phil Liggett and also Paul Sherwin for the first time here this morning. We say hello, guys.
Thank you, Paul. And you've only done 30 minutes, and you're very welcome on the team because I can see clear cases of Tour de France fever. Well, the riders are out on the road. They've gone right to the shadow of an abbey that was built in the year 709. And, Paul, only 42 people live on the island.
It's a very small island, but apparently the omelette there is very wonderful. It goes back to the 1930s. But to me, more importantly, the Tour de France, Phil, always manages to find something special. And imagine starting in the shadows of the Mont-Saint-Michel. But maybe when we look at the riders and the faces of these riders, they are all very nervous on this first day of the race because driving in the last few kilometres, it is going to be a dramatic finish to stage one.
Well, a rather concerned face there of Alberto Contador, who'd love to win what he's hinted originally might be his last Tour de France. We're not so sure now. We're waiting now for the official halting of the peloton and then going to the official cutting of the ribbon and the start of the Tour, right in the shadow of the Abbey. And then across the causeway we go, as they now come into that big circle. Obviously, because of the causeway, thank heavens the tide is out. The riders are now just going to perform the full 360 here to get behind the race director's car, Christian Prudhomme. 198, we've got the best sprinters here, we've got the best time trialists here, we've got the best climbers, and that's why we're set for 3 weeks of fantastic bike racing.
Quite interesting, Phil, because the last time the riders came here, it was an individual time trial, and the bridge that they've just come across right now wasn't built. The planning for that bridge goes back to 1995, when they decided they really needed to repair the damage that had been done to the wetlands in this area. Everyone having a little bit of a laugh at the moment, as you can see, but all these riders, as we've just heard, are all very nervous on this opening day. They realise how important the opening day is, and there's not very many chances throughout the history of the Tour de France where you would get a chance where the first rider to cross the line is going to wear the yellow jersey. That makes it so much more important today.
Yes, and this is our first day of 3 days here in Normandy, steeped in history, of course, with the Second World War. We'll see plenty of that today and tomorrow. But right now we're starting in front of Mont-Saint-Michel. The first time, by the way, the Tour de France has made its start from this region known as La Manche, or the Channel. And they'll go across that causeway, a little bit more neutralised riding. But it's going to be a difficult case. And it's true to say, Paul, that the riders really don't like these narrow roads and opening stages which are buffeted by the winds. They're all getting to know each other for 3 weeks. One touch of wheels and the 3 weeks has a premature ending.
Well, there's absolutely nothing you can do, Phil, in the first week of the race. It is always nervous until the hierarchy has been formed at the top end of the overall standings, and we won't see that until we get right down to the bottom part of France. Although there is a very difficult day on stage 5 today, it's important for the sprinters. And looking at the race list, there are so many sprinters. We've got all of the top sprinters in the world. They will want to have their glory in the first week of racing. But then, of course, all of the top contenders are here and in great form. Yeah, we talk about the top 3. We've talked about Froome. We've talked about Quintana. We've talked about Alberto Contador. But there's a whole host of riders queuing up behind who have the same goal in mind, to get themselves into the top 10, to the top 5, and hopefully onto the podium.
There's Quintana, I think the top riders, the big favourites. It looks like a gentle roll out here across the bridge. I haven't seen the tape cut, but maybe we're going to stop somewhere else. The flag of the Isle of Man there, of course, the flag waving for Mark Cavendish as a likely man to win today. He's going to have to take on some of the fastest on-form men in the world. As happy days at last, they're in the saddle, they are underway, and a big relief all round. Now we can do what we're here to do, that's race a bike fast. Well, you can hear the feet locking into those pedals. They're a bit like ski bindings, the clips. Now we're making the official stop. Bernard Hinault, the last Frenchman to win the Tour de France, on the right and actually doing his final Tour de France. Mark Cavendish shaking hands with Bernard. So the national anthem of France is now played. Now we know we're in France, we're in the shadow of Mont-Saint-Michel, and that we're about to start. It's not quite the smallest start town in the history of the Tour, but not far off, about 12 residents too many. 42 people live on the island.
Well, I would say, Phil, if I was still a professional bike rider, just looking at those flags, that would be my major concern at the start today, because it's going to be a rip-roaring wind in the early stages of this race. And of course, on the opening stage of any Tour de France, that the riders want to get into that early morning breakaway. But this is the ceremonial start to the Tour de France. 3 weeks of great racing over a beautiful parcours.
Well, the wind will come largely from the left shoulder of the riders, and also it'll also turn to be a full-on tailwind as they approach the finishing line today. Simple route, keep the sea on the left, and you shouldn't go off course.
Well, the sprinters we haven't talked too much about there at the back, Phil, wearing number 53, just recently crowned the King of Holland, the Dutch champion. And that, of course, is the youngster Dylan Groenewegen. And all the big boys, though, they're on the front line.
Quintana there, only ridden the course twice, just peeping into the right of our picture there in Movistar. Two times he's ridden, finished in second place. Christian Prudhomme, he's taken the Tour de France all over the European countries. This is the first time we've gone back to France since we started in London 2 years ago, Holland last year, and now it's come home to La Manche for 3 days, in which we'll cover about 275 miles of racing in those 3 days in this area.
Well, this probably will be the last time we'll see Bernard there in the sunglasses. He's said that he will retire. And right in the middle in the dark blue blazer there, you might just have spotted Sir Gary Verity, the man responsible for taking the Tour de France to Yorkshire a couple of years ago. And what great success that was.
Quintana, pressure on him. He says, I'm waiting till the third week of this Tour. I think they're all waiting till the third week, the last week of the Tour de France, and just see how strong that these projected favourites really are. Arthur Vichot there, the new leader, a new champion of France, rather. A little bit of a surprise. He's done it before. And the Patrouille coming over the race.
La Patrouille de France, as they're known, they've made a real arrangement with the Tour de France over the last 3 or 4 years, and what an honour it is to see them do their fly pass at the start, and very often during the course of the Tour de France, even flew over the summit of Alpe d'Huez. And of course, we hopefully await to see them again, Phil, when we come down to the Champs-Élysées, and as I say every year, in 4 Sundays' time.
And how nice to see a warplane flying in peacetime over these shores back into the 6th of June 1944, when the Allied forces landed here to end World War II. The riders getting a little bit saying, okay, it's time to leave now.
Well, I have 12:40 exactly on my clock, and that's exactly the time that the race should be running away. The flag you can see on the right-hand side is a slightly changed flag of La Manche, or the channel region that this is that we're starting from today. Of course, we are very much in the region of Normandy.
There is one hotel on that island, by the way, and it won't hold the 2,000 journalists who daily follow the Tour de France, plus all the riders and race organisation. Here we go. And as they leave the causeway now and come on to the mainland of France, it's only a small crowd by Tour de France standards cheering them up, but frankly, I don't know how they would get there. There's Tommy Vauclair, who is now getting up amongst it. He's almost rivaling Jens Voigt for the highest number of tours ridden, but not quite. As the Frenchman here, all smiles, of course, he's now starting his 14th tour.
Yes, and great success as well, Phil, with the 4-stage victories over the years, but he's very much the captain on the road for his team there, Direct Energy.
So, as the riders have made the neutralised start, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll be with the boys in the studio. It should be a sprinter's day, but we'll tease the future of this year's Tour de France.
The heart and soul.
Another crash. Oh, a massive pile-up. Cavendish is involved in this one. There's no way they can rejoin in time. Marcel Kittel gets the victory. There's been a crash there. Kittel and Sagan trying to go for the line here. It's going to be a desperately close finish. Marcel Kittel takes victory on the line, and Mark Cavendish in all sorts of trouble when it should have been a day of glory for him. That's so sad.
Only one stage win in the last 2 years is a bit sad for the man with more Tour de France stage wins than every other rider in the history of this race, not named Eddy Merckx or Bernard Hinault. His name is Mark Cavendish, and stage one, which started just moments ago, sets up very well for his talents.
British rider Mark Cavendish has a record 26 Tour de France stage wins, a feat most other riders could spend their entire careers chasing. But despite Cav's renowned achievements, there is still one particular dream of his that remains unfulfilled.
The one thing I'm looking forward to is the fact that there's a possibility for a bunch sprint again on the first day to try and get the opportunity to wear the yellow jersey. Will be a big priority for me.
Empty beer cans at the TV.
Out of all the Grand Tours, it's the only leader's jersey I haven't worn yet. I've had unfortunate luck the last times there's been a sprint on the first day.
2013 marked the first time in his career that the yellow jersey was within his reach, because no prologue meant stage one was perfectly set for the sprinters.
Oh, another crash. Oh, a massive pile-up. As they all touch wheels again.
Cavendish is there.
Cavendish on the left of our picture is involved in this one. He's not hurt, but he's riding away as the peloton race on. There's no way they can rejoin in time to win the stage today. It is going to be on the line. Marcel Kittel gets the victory, and he gets a yellow jersey.
Despite the missed opportunity, luck would have it that the 2014 edition not only began with a sprint, but was also hosted in his mother's hometown of Harrogate, England. Millions of fans lined the streets as Cavendish hoped to deliver a fairy tale stage win.
Cavendish has got to come, and he's too far down here. There's been a crash. Marcel Kittel takes victory on the line, and Mark Cavendish in all sorts of trouble when it should have been a day of glory for him. That's so sad.
Regardless of his back-to-back misfortune, Cavendish is more motivated than ever. Riding for a new team, Dimension Data, and primed for another shot at yellow.
I've just got a will to win, you know. I'm willing to hurt myself. I'm willing to be biting the handlebars. I'm willing to suffer to get there, because that desire to be the best of everyone there is just so great in me. And that really helps me. It's always been my benefit. You know, people think I can't do something. The first thing I try and do is go out and prove people wrong.
And while he dreams about putting on yellow, he knows stage wins very, very well. As you can see, only behind Eddie Merckx and Bernard Hinault. Right now, he has 26. Take a look now at what's going on live just outside Mont-Saint-Michel. This is stage one, just underway. It sets up awfully well, as I said, Bob, for Mark Cavendish. Well, what do you think about his chances today and also throughout the first week?
The brunt of his stage wins came before a certain rider joined the peloton, his name Marcel Kittel. Up until that point, Cavendish had free rein to win the sprints when he felt strong enough to do so, and the circumstances were in his favor. But Marcel Kittel has proven himself to be the fastest man on two wheels. It's going to be very challenging for Cavendish to get the better of Marcel Kittel throughout the sprint stages of this year's Tour de France.
Yeah, I agree. If Kittel and Cav go head-to-head on this stretch, Kittel takes it every time. That said, this is like a cage match coming down this last 3 kilometers. It's going to be very technical. It depends on whose team is where. So if Cav does have the opportunity, he could easily make this number 27 today and finally get that yellow jersey.
Bob just called Marcel Kittel the fastest man on two wheels. I call him the guy who won yellow after stage one in 2013 and 2014. And just before the start of stage one, which as you can see is happening right now, he spent a little time with Steve Schlanger.
Marcel, first of all, you missed this race a year ago, and you called it the most difficult moment of your career. So what's it like to be rolling up to the start line again here this morning?
I'm very happy to be back at the Tour. It's great to experience this atmosphere again that you have here at the race. All the people, you have this big Tour village next to the start, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the race now. It's going to be very stressful. That's also part of the Tour de France. But for now, we have good goals. We have a good team, and this is something that I enjoy, and that also motivates me for the next days.
It does seem like a stressful start with a narrow road at the finish. Everybody is nervous. It's intense on the first day, but you've won the opening stage twice here at this race. How do you manage it?
I think the last 2 times that I won, it was always a mix of a great team, good preparation, and also that little bit of extra luck. If you remember the last 2 times when we had a sprint, there was always a crash. It's not, I guess, not going to be much different today. So you have to be in the right moment at the right position to be able to sprint for that victory. And I'm counting on my team today. We really want to make that work, and we also have to see how it's going to be today in the race.
What do you think will be the single biggest challenge when it comes down to those final few K?
The positioning and the right timing. This is really key to success today, and yeah, it's a bit unpredictable. So everyone is starting into the race now, not knowing what is going to happen at the end.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Bob, I noticed he was relaxed enough to smile there a couple times in the interview. What did you see?
I saw that he is 100% ready for whatever might happen. He has done the math. He's totally ready. He knows the dangers, and that's incredibly important. He is ready for anything that happens on today's stage.
We've been watching the neutral start. That man right there is the race director of the Tour de France, Christian Prudhomme. The neutral start about to come to a close, and the official beginning of stage one is about to happen.
Riders wasting 0 time. Drop of the flag and the attacks have already begun.
I got to say, that's a lot more aggressive than usual on the first stage.
Only 117 miles left.
This is the established the early breakaway. It looks like a Cannondale rider launching off the front there with full intention. It might be Never.
That's actually 5 guys, 3 guys on the front, 2 from Bora. I am rider. This could be the break of the day right here. Usually in the first kilometers of the first stage, the break goes quite easily, actually. It's just the first attack goes, and everyone knows that. So that first attack, you have to be in it or else it's over. They make a wall. These are all the sprinters teams that you're looking at right across the front. They make a wall so no one else can attack. This is kind of like a truce. All right, guys, this is going to be a long month. Let's just be smart about this here right now. As smart as we possibly can be, at least.
Is it typical of a flat stage, Bob, to start out that aggressive, or is that the nervous energy because it's stage 1?
No, we're going to see that almost every flat stage of the Tour de France. The early breakaway getting established. They might not have a great success chance, not have a big chance to win, to stay away to the end, but you're going to see that almost every single day of the Tour de France.
That's American Alex Howes, I believe, coming across to the front here. I mean, he's definitely, now, like you said, Bob, the chances of actually these guys making it to the line are slim and none. But there is the KOM jersey if you do win that sprint.
The peloton wants between 3 and 5 riders ideally to be off the front. They want to be able to manage the gap. So we're going to have, it looks like, if Howes and the Fortunato rider can get across, they're having a hard time closing the gap. They're having a real struggle. But between 3, 4, 5 riders, that's ideal for the sprint teams on the flat stages for the breakaway. They'll keep an eye on the gap. They'll get time checks throughout the stage. They'll know exactly how far ahead the breakaway is. If you have more than that, if you have 7, 8, 9, 10 guys, it's much more difficult to control the breakaway in the final. So this is the ideal situation for a breakaway early in the race, but the sprint teams come to the front, chase them down before the wild dash to the finish line.
5 Americans, Christian, led by TJ Van Gardner. When you think about the expectations and chances, where does Alex Howes fit in there?
They're doing exactly this, getting these breakaways, being an opportunist. That's Alex Howes' MO. He's always out there, always looking, putting his nose up there, looking for some breakaways. I didn't expect him to go on stage 1, but this does make sense. If the opportunity of getting one of those jerseys, it's a very intelligent move, very much like what our man Jens Voigt did a couple years ago.
The pictures we're seeing right now, the live pictures here, stage 1, a very good representation that the neutral start is a long way in the rearview mirror, and the sprint is on. Stage 1, a flat stage that will end here on Utah Beach. When we come back here to our live coverage of stage 1, Paul Sherwin and Phil Liggett will have you covered. We'll get you back here to our set at the finish line throughout the broadcast. Our 6 hours of live coverage on NBCSN continue right after this.
This is how precision.
We're back with live pictures, the opening day of the Tour de France, 116.8 miles. We've just said farewell to Mont-Saint-Michel. We're now heading to Utah Beach, and it's going to be tough weather all of the way today. Let's take a look at the Geico weather report. 62 degrees. It's not so warm for this time of the year. Winds are at 15, expected to get stronger out of the west, which means crosswind for much of the way. Let's have a look, Paul, at the Geico stage map.
Well, I think when we have a quick look at the map, Phil, it's all to do with the wind direction as well. So the Geico stage map, the riders started just a few moments ago from the Mont-Saint-Michel. They actually rode out to the Mont-Saint-Michel and did a start at the bottom in the shadows of Mont-Saint-Michel before moving away for the race start proper. They're now well out on their way towards the Côte d'Avranches and then through the Côte de Falaise de Champeau to fourth category climbs in the first part of the course. But more importantly, down towards the end, they've got a sprint point at La Haye, and there they charge with a massive big tailwind finish over the last 3 or 4 miles before they come right down into the finishing straight in Utah Beach.
And that's going to be an extremely exciting finish, believe me. It should be a sprint, you can never tell. There's the profile today. We're barely above sea level, but anybody that knows this beautiful area of Normandy, it's up and down all of the time, and they are quite short and sharp climbs. Live pictures. Now, if you think we're taking the day off, and we've just started the Tour de France, in fact, 5 riders have got clear. These boys seem to be happy with the 5 names who've gone up front. We don't think they've all got themselves together yet, but they are Alex Howes, one of only 5 Americans in this race. Paul Voss, a German, Jan Barter from the Czech Republic, Lee Howard, who, by the way, becomes the 54th Australian to take part in the Tour de France, and the Frenchman Anthony Delaplace. There's the first 3, so that'll be Voss, Barter and Howard. I'm surprised, Paul, the other 2 haven't got across yet.
Well, they went so hard out of the starting blocks that these 2 riders here, you can see Alex House in the lime green jersey of Cannondale with Anthony Delaplace, a local rider. The French like to call them a régional de l'étape, while at the back, Phil, already a few little bumps and starts.
Well, this is always the concern. They're very nervous. It looks like a pretty harmless one at the moment. Astana rider there. It looks like one of the newcomers, Diego Rosa, has had his first crash on his very first morning in the Tour de France. See if we can show you that again.
Well, if you have a look, Phil, it's over there as we look from the helicopter shots, and it's always very much like that in the opening stages of the Tour de France. Everybody nervous, and that accident right up towards halfway in the main field, and it was just a little touch of wheels, and 2 Astana riders riding fairly close together. I don't think they'll be too concerned about that crash, but it will increase the nervousness in the peloton of all of the other riders.
Yes, they're anxious to get these nervous reactions out of the way here, but there we can see it again now magnified, just nearest the right-hand side of the road. Looks like a silly touch of wheels, down they go, but everybody ready for that one. That was a low-speed crash. Well, he's in his first Tour de France, Diego Rosa. Now we join the 3 leaders as they try to consolidate a lead. Our man who's already up in front is inside the race. Let's join Steve Perino. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Phil, how are you?
Good to
speak to you. I got
to
to say that, you know, right then when the crash happened, you know, we were barely moving, but it did sort of dent that pretense of calm. When I spoke to the various directors this morning, obviously the question is not only who's going to win the sprint, but how do you manage all this stress when you know something's going to happen? And no one has an answer. They simply say it is a reality. Statistically, every rider in this race will crash on average 2.7 times over the course of 3 weeks. And so when I talk to the directors, they say, you know what? The crash, it is going to happen.
I find that always a worry, Paul. Now, you rode the Tour de France 7 times. When you start the season, you know you're going to fall off at some stage. You want to get it out the way, don't you?
Well, you certainly do. And if you get a little incident like that early on in a day like this, then hopefully you've got all of your crashes behind you. But the first days of the Tour de France, everybody's extremely nervous, and especially, I think, more so on today's stage, because at the end of the day, the first guy to cross the line will get himself the yellow jersey. But it's just a question. There are certain regions that seem to be more dangerous than others. Brittany and Normandy, because of the narrow roads and the wind that tends to batter the riders as well, that just adds to the nervousness and to the danger.
Well, we've seen him already earlier today, but one man we're delighted is alongside us, and we're not racing against him, is of course Jens Voigt. Jens, you're at the finishing line today.
Yes, I am, and I'm watching the picture, so I can see the breakaway happening. And if you guys wonder why the first 3 guys don't wait for them, it's clearly because we got the first KOM of the day, the King of the Mountain, coming in less than 10 kilometers. And one of these 5 riders out there is going to have the mountain jersey tonight. So the first 3 guys, we don't wait for them. We want to have the points for us, so we take the mountain jersey today.
Well, the sign there showing we've now left Mont-Saint-Michel, 12 kilometres or 7 miles behind us. The Côte d'Avranches, it's a nasty little town. We once had a team time trial there. At 20 kilometres into the race, as Jens has said, there it is. You can almost see it's visibly sitting at altitude above sea level there. And, of course, the man that wins gets 1 point in the King of the Mountains competition, and that could be the first leader tonight.
Yes, and there's a second King of the Mountains pointer just a little further on at 40 kilometres or 25 miles into the race at the Côte de Falaise-Champeau. But I've always found it very difficult of the race organisers over the last couple of years, because they've changed the point system, so there are much less points in the early King of the Mountains points, and it's all based on trying to have a real King of the Mountains with much bigger points for the big mountains. I just noticed somebody stopped to the right-hand side of the road there from Team Lotto.
Well, there's the crowds, the flags of Brittany flying in Normandy. That's a first. I think I doubt it very much. For you guys on the West Coast, it's time for a coffee. We'll take a break.
For those who jumpstart
sportsmanship. We're looking out across the coast of Normandy now into the heart of the department. The Tour de France is about 3 miles away from the first climb of this year's Tour, the Côte d'Avranches. Only the winner gets a point, but it could mean a polka dot leader's jersey tonight. The peloton are still chasing. The 5 riders up front have not merged, and I think Jens Voigt is right. It's because they want to keep the battle between 3 of them at the front.
Yes, but you can see the speed, Phil. When you see the main field stretched out into the long line like this, I'm getting a few bits of access to some data coming from the race, and they're riding at 55 kilometers an hour in the main field, and that's close to 32, wow, 33 miles an hour. So they're taking it very seriously. They've seen the gap of that breakaway go up to almost 4 minutes right now, and you've got the teams of the big sprinters, Marcel Kittel and Andre Greipel, right on the front of the main field. The job of those 2 teams is to get the breakaway group pegged now.
Well, these are the 3 leaders here. As we're looking at the rider in the white jersey, that's Lee Howard. He comes from Geelong in Australia. He becomes the 54th Australian to take part in the Tour de France. He finally got selection, and he's in the breakaway, and there he is there. He's joined by 2 riders from Bora, which are Paul Voss and Jan Barter. All right, well, as they settle into their Tour de France, it's time for our Tour de France. Each year we give you our predictions. Let me quickly go through them with you. We get 1 pick a day. No rider can be picked twice, so we all have to pick a different man, and the order of the picks alternates each day. The start picking was decided by the finishing order last year. I was last, by the way. The stage winner gets 5 points, etc. And so let's have a look how we're all... Christian won last year, the rookie won. That's ridiculous. Marcel Kittel, he's gone for. He's off to a good start, I fear. Paul has chosen Andre Greipel, another man who's never not won a stage of the Tour during any of his appearances. Bob gone for Peter Sagan, and Jens Mark Cavendish, and I can't believe none of them didn't pick Alexander Kristoff, and I've gone for him.
A very solid choice there. All sprinters, because that's what we expect. But to get there, it's going to be a long, hard chance. Jens, tell me a little bit about your pick there, because, you know, picking right down towards it, you weren't very lucky last year.
Well, I still finished second last, so I still beat the well-experienced voice of cycling, Phil Liggett. So I think I did not bad for rookie. But, well, some of the names were already taken. And then I hesitated between picking Brian Coquard from Direct Energy and Mark Cavendish. But Mark Cavendish, he's going to be desperate for a first stage win, taking the yellow jersey today. So he is my pick.
Well, it's got a superb field of sprinters, and it's a very, very difficult sprint finish. We'll see more of that as our coverage unfolds. Remember, today, by the end of this day, we'll have brought you a massive 6 hours of live coverage on NBCSN. Tremendous coverage today of this opening day of the Tour de France. So there's the crowd. The Normands love the Tour de France. We'll take a break. When we come back, we will be contesting our first climb of this year's Tour de France. The polka dot jersey is up for grabs.
From your first ride to your dream ride.
Vessel. And we are now on the road of Normandy here. We have had a split in that main group, with the team tactics going on, because 2 riders in that front group of 3 are on the same squad. Paul Voss has made a move, and Paul Lee Howard is being marshalled by teammate Jan Barter.
I'm not quite sure that that's a sensible move, Phil, so far out. I know he's going for the single point at the top of the first King of the Mountains point in the Côte d'Avranches, but it's an awful long way to go to the finish. We're looking at a 117-mile stage. They would have done a little better, I think, to keep together. There is the lone leader we're talking about, 1:39, Paul Voss. And he's at 1.3 kilometers now, which is just inside a mile away from the top of the climb.
This is how he did it. He went about 3 kilometers out, and the rider on the front was his teammate Jan Barter from the Czech Republic. It's up to the man in white, Lee Howard, to counter. Of course, if he countered, then you bet your life Barter would have counter-attacked again. So team tactics working well. Let's go inside the race with Steve Perino.
Yeah, well, Jens, you got it exactly right. I just checked in with the director, Bora Argon. They said they were absolutely not going to sit up and wait, and they had one guy in mind that was going to go for that KOM jersey. Of course, he wouldn't tell me, but that was very much on their mind at the beginning of the day, and read the tea leaves perfectly was Jens Voigt.
Yeah, absolutely right. As we head into the town of Avranches here, 2016, the whole of this region is become 1 week of a party as they welcome the Tour de France here for such a long time for the very first time.
Not one of the big mountains of the Tour de France here, Phil. 1.2 kilometres, 350 feet, the ultimate altitude. But the points available, well, a massive big one. But it's important, and I think that's probably why Paul Voss made the move. They will be very concerned about Lee Howard. He's a very good sprinter, and he's got a great pedigree in the back of his suitcase of having raced on the track. So I think we may well see that once Voss, the rider we're looking at here, goes over the top of this climb, sensibly, I would say he should sit up and wait for the others who are trailing him currently by around about half a minute.
So Paul Voss, the German rider, leading on the slopes. 1 point could mean a polka dot jersey tonight. Remember last year when Daniel Tekla-Heimerhoff gave us such a wonderful start for the African continent, and he led the King of the Mountains for 4 days after he started with 1 point. It's got to make you go fast, hasn't it, up the hill?
Well, I mean, Phil, when you're riding up a mountain like this, it's not really a mountain at this part of the Tour de France, but that crowd, that tunnel of noise, it really is very special. You know right now you're in the biggest bike race in the world.
First objective, perfect. Paul Voss had planned to do that before the race started, and it has happened. One more climb to come in the next 12 miles. Now the clock is counting on top of the climb here. The two chasers behind these two, by the way, seem to be losing ground. And there's no time on the clock at all for them now. So they tried to bridge the gap, but they didn't make it by the look of it. This is a beautiful town, Avranches, by the way. Did you ride a team time trial that came through here?
No, I didn't.
It was a long way, wasn't it?
It was an awful long way. The time trial team there, Lee Howard, has jumped away to get himself second position.
You know,
a little bit
Paul,
of pride there, Phil.
You've really got to look at the regulations. There's nothing for second.
You have to read the regulations. Avranches, they've had some very long time trials. The longest team time trial I ever rode, Phil, was 150 kilometres that finished in Caen.
Okay, well, we've been on the road for less than an hour. We have our first leader in the Tour de France, at least in the mountains. His name is Paul Voss, but the race still has a long way to go today.
Routine.
Welcome back. We're focused on the man who heads the Tour de France in these opening kilometres of the 2016 103rd edition of this great race. First began, by the way, back in 103. Only the World Wars stopped it on those particular years. There's the peloton going through the streets of Avranches now, right in the heart of Normandy. And they're sitting off the pace by around about 4 3/4 minutes just now. They're just going over the top of that little climb, which about 4.5 minutes ago was won by Paul Voss.
And going back into the history books, Phil, it was right here that the Australian Brad McGee won his first stage of the Tour de France back in 2002, although he came back the next year for the 100th anniversary to win the prologue in Paris.
Beautiful sight through a beautiful city here, Avranches. Such a diverse country, France. Every department, as they call their areas, has a particular piece of character of its own. 3 days we're here this year, some 435 kilometres, about 270 miles of racing in the area of Normandy. Crowds will be big, believe me.
Important Avranches as well in the D-Day landings, because it was in Avranches that General Patton, in fact, made his early headquarters to be in charge of an overlook, the Operation Overlord, which was the beginning of the Normandy invasions on the 6th of June 1944. So an important strategic point as well for the Road of the Liberation.
Yeah, it's a very emotional region. Paul and I spent a couple of days going along those beaches, which all the men that lost their lives there have never been forgotten, never will be. The remnants of American tanks as they came ashore.
The Sherman tank that we're looking down on here on Phil, right in the heart of Avranches. And this is the square general pattern where that Sherman tank stands in glory to remember and remind us what happened 72 years ago.
So, as we continue our tour there of Avranches, let's go right outside our window here and have a chat with Jens Voigt. Jens, your fellow German rider on the lone lead now. This doesn't sound a bright move to me, but is it?
Well, definitely it is if you look at his objective of the day. I mean, he's under no illusion that he's going to win the stage and take a yellow jersey with, 1,500 sprinters in the peloton still. So he is just going out for the yellow jersey, and I would not be surprised at all. I meant the mountain jersey, sorry. I will not be surprised at all if he just waits at kilometer 40 after the second KOM. He's going to wait for the rest of the group. They're going to regroup, all 5 of them, and keep riding and keep staying out there as long as they can. But not before the last KOM.
Yeah, but Jens, you know how important it is. People don't realize how difficult it is to get into this breakaway. This is almost carbon copy what you did in the Tour de France 2 years ago.
Well, I guess it's the moment where I can blow my own trumpet a little. Yes, I think they copied my tactics from 2 years ago.
Jensie, nobody'll ever keep you down, mate. 17 tours under those wheels. Well, the 2 riders that Vos has left are his teammate Jan Barter and Lee Howard. The other 2 riders, Anthony Delaplace, who lives in this region, doesn't look like he's going to catch up either with those front runners. We'll take a break as we race and say goodbye to Avranches.
Hey, I'm Paul.
There are 5 Americans taking the long road to Paris this time around, and we expect to see them in front of our cameras for those 3 weeks. TJ Van Garderen, of course, the big favourite to try and improve on that 5th place finish he had back in 2012 and 2014. But Lawson Craddock is in there for the first time. We used to call him the baby-faced assassin as he produced to become a mature man. And he's a rider we are expecting to be of great quality this week in his very first tour. 48 seconds the gap. The 4 riders have got together behind. We haven't had any pictures of them, I must confess. We've still got Paul Vos. He's just trying to stay out front long enough to get 1 more point on the only other categorized climb of the day, which comes on the Côte de Falaise Champeau. And if that works, I think he'll sit up and wait for the boys behind. Here they are.
This is the second group on the road, and there is one of the other American riders we were talking about, Alex House. He's in the group of 4 riders now. They're around about 3/4 of a minute behind the overall leader, Paul Vos. Now, if Paul Vos can survive to go over the Côte de la Falaise de Champeau in first place, I think the better part of valor, Phil, would be to sit up and wait for reinforcements to come from the rear, because, as I said, it's an awful long stage today, the opening day, 117 miles, 188 kilometers. And looking at the main peloton, you can see there's a fair amount of pressure being applied by the teams of the sprinters.
Right, well, the Americans, all except one, are in that big peloton down there. Well, we just have Alex Howes up front in that chase group, but it's Alex Howes' teammate who's creating a lot of interest here, Lawson Craddock. And here he is before the start this morning, talking with Steve Slanger.
All right, Lawson Craddock, here you are. First day of your first ever Tour de France. What is going through your mind?
I'm just ready to race. I've really looked forward to this moment for years now, and to be here after so much hard work and lining up with the Tour de France, one of the biggest sporting events in the world, is really truly an incredible experience.
What have these last few days been like in the lead up, just coming here, getting ready, and knowing the big day was on its way?
Just a lot of anticipation. We work for this moment for pretty much all year, and you come here a couple days ahead of the race, and you just kind of sit around on your bed, get a massage, and just waiting for this race to start. But it's really exciting. We're all really motivated to put on a good show.
What are you hoping to achieve in this race?
I'd love to, help here to a high overall standing once we're in Paris, and if there's an opportunity for myself, I'd love to take it. Obviously, the white jersey is such a prestigious you know, accomplishment in this sport, and just wearing it for a day or two would be huge for me, I think.
What's the best piece of advice about this race the veterans have given you?
Oh man, just relax. It's just another bike race. You know, I've been racing since I was 10 years old, so my 14th year of racing, but coming here, it's a race unlike any others, but at the end of the day, it also is just a bike race. So just got to take it as it comes and, you know, just push every day.
Well, have fun in this bike race.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks.
Paul, just another bike race. That's hardly what anybody thinks when they come to the start of the Tour de France, no matter how hard a professional bike rider they are. But that's the way this lad has been throughout his career, full of ambition and drive.
Yes, and it's always good on the first day to have a teammate in the breakaway like this with Alex House. But talking to his team before the start of the race, they seem very happy to have Lawson Craddock with not too much pressure on his shoulders in this race, because they've got a Frenchman on their squad, Pierre Rolland. And Cannondale really believe that Pierre Rolland can crack easily into the top 10. So if Lawson Craddock is going to be a Tour de France contender in the future, what a way to ride his first Tour de France with a guy like Pierre Rolland on board, the Frenchman, on his squad.
Absolutely. Hey, Jens, your first Tour, 1998. I can only just remember it. How did you feel on that day?
I actually did feel like a little boy on Christmas Day. I felt like my childhood dream is coming true, and it was just a fantastic feeling. I mean, I was young, I was strong, I was ready, I trained for it, just like Lawson Craddock just said. You train for it all year long, and you're ready. So you felt like a loaded spring coil, just ready, and somebody pulls the trigger and let you go. And needless to say, I was on a breakaway on the very first stage in my very first Tour de France.
That does not surprise me in the least, Jens, and that's how you ended your career, going in breakaways when you retire from 17 tours. I know you don't count it. You told us you don't count how many times. You'd like to have won it 17 times, but 17 times is an incredible record in the Tour de France. Paul, Tony Martin, well, last time we visited Mont-Saint-Michel, Martin won the time trial.
Yeah, that was back in 2013. He's got other goals on his mind this afternoon. He wears the blue and black jerseys of Team Ethics Quick Step, and they have the man that we are really talking about as being one of the fastest men on the circuit on their team, and that of course is Marcel Kittel. He didn't ride the Tour de France last year, but he'll certainly be up for the victory this afternoon.
Well, as we look out across La Manche, or the Channel, we'll take another break. The riders in the distance in Mont-Saint-Michel were heading for Utah Beach today.
Appliances.
On the Open, July 14th to the 17th. Looking out into La Manche here, the Channel, as the riders now head towards the finish today in Utah Beach. We're only just in for about an hour plus of racing. The peloton are sitting off the leaders by just over 4 minutes, and the chase is closing in on the lone leader, Paul Voss.
Yes, Phil, the four chasers, they're around about half a minute, but a few moments ago we had a chance to see that really they've got them in they've got the lone leader Paul Voss in their sights. This is Thomas de Gent on the front. Not a surprise to see him doing all of that big pacemaking. Third position in that line. A little bit further down is big old Adam Hansen, and just off the coast here you can see just how magical this part of Normandy is.
Well, these are the wetlands of the coast here, which caused so many problems for the Allied forces when they tried to come in from the sea. They had to prepare and dry out these regions and bridge them before they could get onto the land and launch their final assault. D-Day, June 1944. They're known as the Chaussee Islands.
Well, we've covered 35 kilometres, Phil, and we only just coming up to the end of the first hour of racing in this stage of 117 miles of racing. This archipelago, just off the coast of Saint-Michel, really is quite amazing tidal plain that you can see in the background. A lot of the ships and the sailing ships that you can see in this area, they go out actually to collect a lot of mussels from this part of the area.
The peloton winding its way through what is basically a farming community now as we make our way steadily up the coast. So, one or two little Norman small chateaus for you to start our journey of history as we unwind our route all the way around to Paris over the next 3 weeks. Let's go back inside the race now and catch up with Steve Perino.
I can tell you right now, behind the peloton, Phil, it seems like it's fairly relaxed. Lots of riders coming back at liberty to get refreshments and talk to their director and easily move back through. But as you pointed out, I'll take your word for it, that Voss is still getting reeled in, and that might be because right now they're facing a headwind. But so far the wind is terribly mercurial, and I learned every year I learned something new about the technology inside the race. But Edix Quickstep, for example, they know the weather patterns because they have a specific weather service that they use that tracks all the microclimates, and they have a separate weather report every 20 kilometers along this road. There's almost nothing they're not ready for.
Yeah, well, as you know, Paul, because you've done it 7 times, this first day is always very nervous.
And it's quite important to have access to that kind of information as well, Phil, because you've got to realise that if the breakaway goes clear, and as we look at once you see a breakaway of 5 riders, the main field, because we're looking at 198 riders starting to the Tour de France, you pretty much in the back of your mind know that they're not going to survive. But if you know there's a big headwind coming up, you can back off in your chasing because you know that they will actually slow down once you get to the headwind part, so you don't have to chase too hard and too long.
Well, the peloton aren't going to have too much interest in what lies ahead because I think the breakaway should make the next climb along the road. We'll be there when we come back after this break. We're hitting the summit here of the second and last climb of the day in this opening stage. Paul Voss, who's riding his 3rd Tour de France. He's never failed to reach Paris, and never before has he worn a leader's jersey. But he will tonight, Paul.
That face tells it all, Phil. He's got himself 2 points out on the course, so 1 for each summit as we look at the chasers here. And you know, I have a funny feeling, Phil, that a little bit further back, Lee Howard hasn't studied the race manual to realise there's only 1 point available at each climb. But anyway, he was a last-minute inclusion into the Tour de France. He said he was very lucky that he hadn't booked his holidays for July because it was a last-minute call to get onto the team.
Well, I'm glad he got in, Lee Howard, and I know that all of Geelong will be cheering for him back home, his home in Australia. But you're right, he hasn't read the race regulations. Hey, he's been too occupied. In fact, the riders in the Tour this year, between them, have got 15 tours under those wheels, but Lee Howard is yet to get to Paris. Yeah, not surprisingly, job done for Paul Voss now. Jan Barter, his teammate, first up alongside him. He's going to say, well done, mate. Well, we've got a leader's jersey. Plan A just worked out for us. Now, what will they do?
Well, they'll now collaborate. Jan Barter is a good man to have in the breakaway. He was in the breakaway on the opening road stage of the Tour de France last year. But, you know, he's a powerful rider. He's been 4 times national time trial champion of his country. So he's quite happy with that. Look at that little thumbs up sign. Good job. Job done for us. Bora Argon, King of the Mountains jersey at the end of the day. Now let's get down to the job at hand and try and hold on to as much of our advantage as possible over the next couple of hours of racing.
Well, we're going to skim right around the coastline for much of the route today before we do turn inland to cross the peninsula and then get on to the other side, which, of course, is Utah Beach, the most westerly of the 5 landing points during D-Day in 1944. It's just as well that wind isn't ripping in off the left hand of our picture today, because it would really hurt the peloton. I'm sure they're getting a beautiful smell of the salt water, though, blowing in. The kelp, which always smells when it comes ashore. That kelp, the old seaweed, doesn't it?
Good smell, a good healthy smell as well. Good for the lungs. And I think the riders, I think they're quite happy with this. It's more of a breeze than anything else at the moment, Phil, but I really do think they will have had all of the information sent back to them from the finishing line. On the running down towards the finish in Utah Beach, they've got a lot of crosswinds, but once they finally line up for the finishing line, they have got a roaring tailwind. I'm looking at the flags out here on the finishing line, and they are still straight out. We will see a charge to the line approaching 40 to 45 miles an hour before they actually light up the sprint.
Yeah, it's going to be a very, very difficult approach to the line. It's dead straight, slight kink in it just before we get up to the line, but basically it's going to be a free-for-all, and we've got so many great sprinters in the race. It really will be a battle royale running down those last 5 kilometres of road. Lotto, of course, they feel they are carrying the man who will win the day in Andre Greipel, so they're going to pay close attention to the whereabouts of those 5 leaders and just keep their riders in touch, because they know that Greipel can deliver. He's on great form.
In fact, I had a quick phone call with Sean Yates, the team manager of Peter Sagan this morning, Phil, and asked him what the plan was for today. He said, well, we really are just going to see what happens between the 2 big, strong lead-out teams of Ethics Quick-Step and of Lotto Soudal. He said they are the 2 big, strong lead-out teams. They've got the 2 best sprinters. He said he had been to have a look at the course. He knows what the run-in is down towards the finish line. And, of course, even though we don't regard Peter Sagan as a real straight sprinter, he's ready for the challenge here this afternoon. And he's the kind of rider who, I have to say, you know, you can never discount him, even though he's not a pure sprinter like the others.
As we look out across the coastline, let's go outside to Jens Voigt. Jens.
Yeah, when we look at the pictures, here we're just passing the last KOM sign. There is only Team Lotto and Kittel's team Quickstep riding tempo. None of the teammates of Mark Cavendish and none of the teammates of Christoph are helping. So they keeping their firepower safe for the final. Maybe that makes a difference in the end. In the moment, they're not helping at all to chase that breakaway.
So there we are, the long empty road ahead of the race. They start to turn away from this side of the Manche with about 77 kilometres done. There's the man of the day, the first leader of the King of the Mountains in this year's Tour de France. Well done, Paul Voss.
The official training bike of the Tour de France. Go to proform.com and get 0 down and free shipping.
Looking down on what are now 5 leaders in the Tour de France. Finally, we've got them all together. Remember, we had 3 breakaway, 2 chase for ages, then 1 left the front 3, and gradually they've all come together. Looking at Alex House, one of only 5 American riders in this race, and he's in the first breakaway of this year's Tour de France. The peloton are no longer allowing them to run now. It's 3 minutes and 7 seconds. I'm sure there's a big chase down there in the race. Maybe we can find out. Let's go inside the race with Steve Perino.
Well, Phil, we talk about how often there are dangers out on the course, how unpredictable it is. Moments ago, I was watching across a field as a set of deers was darting towards the tail end of the peloton. Suddenly, a baby deer appeared right at the very edge, and then right when it got to the street, it came down the very edge of the caravan, literally about a foot away from our motorcycle. That's how close it is. I guess they have a no-leash law here on the deer.
Steve, I've got to ask you, because I'll get the emails, was the fawn okay?
The fawn, yeah, went uninjured, made a very agile move, just skirt along the edge of the road and then back into the field.
Great news. It only happens on the Tour de France. Thanks very much, Steve. 3 minutes, 2 seconds is now the gap. 5 riders as we continue through the towns here. I think we're in Carol now as we continue our journey between the corridors of noise. Well, we can go upstairs now, and Paul Burmeister, remember, is getting his first feelings of the Tour de France. Big crowds here, Paul. Up to you guys.
Hey, Phil, thank you very much. We don't have our fawn or our deer reports ready to go. However, we have been thinking about Nairo Quintana, one of the contenders for the overall GC. And while he won't look to win any of the sprint stages this week, what can he learn from his experience in week 1 last year?
Well, week 1 last year in the Tour de France, stage number 2, Nairo Quintana may have lost the Tour de France by missing out in a split in the field caused by a crash and crosswinds and bad weather, something that's very common in the opening week. Where the top of the arrow was, that's the lead group. And if you wanted to win last year's Tour de France, you had to be there. At the end of the stage, Quintana lost 1 minute, 28 seconds, and that man, number 14, Imanol Erviti, has been brought into the Tour de France to prevent that from happening in this year's edition of the bike race. That man on this team finished 9th in a one-day classic called Paris-Roubaix earlier in the spring. To do that, you have to have a massive motor and be very strong on the flats and in the crosswinds. So he's been brought onto the team to shepherd Nairo through the first week of the bike race.
I mean, I understand he's a great bike rider. I respect him a lot, but that's a lot of pressure to put on one man's shoulder, just one guy. When you have Sky, we have BMC, we have Edix, you have some big boys. So I don't like putting it all on one person. You still have to have a team all going for the same thing, and that's getting Nairo safe to the finish line in the same time as the winner today.
About 29 miles in, actually 29.1 miles into the 117-mile course here on stage one that started back in Mont-Saint-Michel. And Bob, as expected, not a lot of action so far. That's going to come later as we get closer to the finish here in Utah Beach. But what has stood out so far?
So far, the Bora team. This is what they came to the Tour de France to do. Talked to Rolf Dank, the team manager, before the start. He said, if we got one of the jerseys during the Tour de France, we would be thrilled. And they have just achieved that with the 2 King of the Mountain points, both Cat 4s. And that will not be the standings at the end of the Tour de France, obviously. But so far, for Paul Voss and the Bora Argon team, they'll have the polka dot jersey, one of only 4 jerseys. And those are so valuable, so precious that people race flat out for those. He split the breakaway, and he did get those 2 points. So he'll have the King of the Mountains. That's a fabulous accomplishment. And for Bora, Argon 18, that's why they've come to the Tour de France. They don't have the fastest sprinter. They don't have the best climbers. They have to find the breaks and get the prizes when they can. So it's already been a success. For a team, one of the smaller teams, an invitation team in the 2nd division of professional cycling, great riding by Paul Voss in today's stage.
Christian, as we look forward to what's coming up a little bit later in the race as we get closer to the finish, a couple of questions. Number one, what are you anticipating? And number two, at what point here can we expect the action to really begin?
Well, I was thinking back when we were watching the footage of last year's first road stage, and that split happened with over 50 kilometers to go. That's a long way to go to be driving the pace at the front. I don't expect the split to happen, or if there is a split to happen that far out today, but I do expect to see a lot of nerves, a lot of tension. As you see the time come down already under 3 minutes, that's just because of the nerves in the peloton. They still have 140 kilometers to go, 85 miles. That's a long way to go. They can have these guys, they can let these guys have 6-7 minutes. It's going to have no bearing on the overall or the sprint win today. So I think it's all going to be about the tension when they start coming back down the other side of La Manche, coming down the coast. When they take that right in Quinville with about 35 kilometers to go, that's when we're going to start really seeing the final. I hope there's no crashes, but I do anticipate them.
And we'll be here waiting a little under 87 miles left here to the finish of stage one on the shore of Utah Beach. When we come back to stage one of the Tour de France, Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwin will have you covered with the action.
Looking out across the many little mounds here, which abound in La Manche, or the Atlantic part of the channel here, part of the Atlantic Ocean.
Just
The
looking
wind
at the
is
flags.
blowing strong, Paul.
Yeah, sorry, Phil. Just looking at those flags, that's the big danger for today, and more importantly, on the running down towards the finish. We're making our way up in a northerly direction for the moment, with most of the wind being on the riders' left-hand shoulders. But once we go through the sprint point at La Haye, after about 74 miles of racing, that's when we'll start to pick up a tailwind, and then another crosswind as we head down southerly towards Utah Beach. And that's when I think it'll start to get very grippy.
That's fantastic. That's done in the sand, Paul, and it still looks perfect down there. Description of La Manche, which is the region the Tour is in. The first time the Tour has ever started in this region since it first made its original journey around France back in 1903. Crowd enjoying. I have to say it's not as warm as it looks out there, as we'll take a look at the profile of the race route. Nothing terribly descriptive today, but it's hard countryside to race in.
It is. We've been through the first King of the Mountain points at Avranches and Côte de Falaise de Champeau, but it's really rolling. And more importantly, once we go through the sprint point at La Haye, big points available too for the green jersey points competition there. The roads are rolling. They're never really flat in this part of the world, but once we get down to the final 25 miles of racing, that's when it gets grippy. Back with the leaders though, Phil, you know, the main field have now got them very much pegged inside of 3 minutes. So I think there's going to be a yo-yo effect from now on. It'll be a little bit like a fisherman who's got his fish on the line. He'll be playing with that fish, playing with his catcher for the moment when he wants to reel it in and put it into the keep net.
Wow, look at these makeshift campsites here as the Tour passes by here in Normandy. Lovely atmosphere. The Tour de France means summer to most people, and the month of July, of course, it's always been held in July. And these are the day one heroes of today's stage of the Tour de France. 5 of them getting together right from the gun. They finally got themselves together around 25 miles into the race, all 5 of them. Gap is holding at 2:47, so one has to feel that the big pack has got this one well covered. They're not going to chase it down till they have to, because once they start doing that, then it's going to be a free-for-all as we run down towards Utah Beach.
The other thing to remember on the opening stage as well, Phil, is when you come into these small little towns, the roads are quite narrow, so you've got to be alert all of the time, especially when you're not exactly sure what's coming around the next corner, because there's so much traffic furniture in this day and age. You've got to be alert all of the time. You can take the risk as an overall contender of sitting in the first 15 or 20 positions, or you can take the risk of sitting down towards the back end. But that's why it's so nervous. Everybody's concerned about the possibility of a crash somewhere in the main field going through these beautiful little villages.
Well, Lotto know their job and know their job well today is to keep this race in touch with those 5 leaders, wipe them out when they feel they have to, and then guide their man, Andre Greipel, to the stage victory. This amazing guy has never not won a stage in a Tour de France appearance, and he's hoping this year won't be an exception. Has a little bit of an added Philip, because Jurgen Roland's on his team. It's his birthday today, Paul. I'll guarantee if Andre wins, he's going to say, that's for you.
Yes, 31 years of age, Jurgen Roland. He's one of the riders who is extremely important in the lead-out train down towards the end. But it was rather interesting what Jensi was saying before. These 2 teams of the 2 big sprinters at Greipel. You can just see Greipel on the left-hand side there, by the way. He actually got the better of Marcel Kittel in the recent German national championships, with Greipel getting 1st place and Kittel getting 3rd place. But that was the championships. It's not the opening stage of the Tour de France with the yellow jersey at the end of the tunnel.
No, it's a big... the winner will pull on yellow. The riders have declared a truce. They're just stepping off the bikes there. So that's a great time for us to take a break and let the boys up front to try and continue the journey. There they are. Barta, De La Place, Howard, Howes and Voss are the leaders on the stage today for a while.
The Tour de France is a very old race. The jersey has probably one of the longest traditions in cycling, and to wear it for a day on your own shoulders is just a big honor.
The yellow jersey is, I don't even know what you can compare it to. I've never had a day in yellow, but man, I'd certainly love to.
The opportunity to wear the yellow jersey as a sprinter doesn't come very often. Even when it's there, you're not the only one who really wants to wear their jersey and to win the first stage.
Out of all the Grand Tours, the only leader's jersey I haven't worn yet. To try and get the opportunity to wear the yellow jersey on the first day will be a big priority.
It's special because it's this special jersey that is for 21 days there. On the end, you have to enjoy every moment you can with this jersey.
To have the chance already twice in my life, in my career, yeah, it's an incredible feeling.
For sure, it's a big goal for me. Yellow is the color of cycling, especially of the Tour de France, and I think my career was already quite good, but I can make it better with this nice color.
Yes, as we look out across Normandy, it's in this department today. The Golden Fleece will be put on by a rider because it really is up for grabs today. The man that wins the stage pulls on yellow for tomorrow's stage. And as we heard those riders say, that's all they want to do as top professional bike riders is wear yellow.
Yeah, it's such a magical moment. I've never been there myself, but I do know when you know the history of the Tour de France, when you know the stories of the yellow jersey, that's why this opening stage. And for the sprinters, Phil, very often they don't get that chance because the Tour de France, more often than not, starts with an opening prologue time trial, which gives the specialist in the time trial more of a chance. Today, though, it's all about the sprinters.
It should be. The gap is 2 minutes 46. There's a problem with 5 riders leading the race at the moment. Now, one man with a great history in this event is Fabian Cancellara. Now, he's riding his last Tour de France. He's told us already this year, by the end of the season, he will have retired. And, you know, he's worn the yellow jersey more occasions than any other current racing cyclist, except, of course, the final winner of the Tour de France. Let's take a closer look at the career of the man we love to call Spartacus. 2015 was supposed to be Fabian Cancellara's 10th and final Tour de France. In extraordinary fashion, he took advantage of a time bonus to claim yellow on stage 2. A fairy tale farewell seemed in the making. That was until the next day. It's been a touch of wheels and the rider fell right in the middle.
That is Cancellara.
Cancellara is in there. What a shame this was.
I tried to stand up, but it wasn't that easy because pain all over. My only goal on this day, just arriving with the jersey, to honoring this jersey. Straight after the finish line, I joined straight away the hospital. That was broken bones on my back, and yeah, yellow jersey is gone, and tour was over.
Since his very first Tour de France in 2004, when he won the opening prologue and his first yellow jersey, Cancellara has been a consistent animator at this great race. He has collected 8 stage wins and has worn the yellow jersey for 29 days. But the Tour de France is not the only place Cancellara has made his mark on the sport of cycling. His resume lacks little and includes an Olympic time trial gold medal, a record 4 World Championship titles, and 7 major victories in the one-day classics. And now, at 35 years of age, Cancellara feels the time has come to retire from the sport on which he has made such a huge impact.
I said always to myself, I want to decide by myself when it's the time to go. I want to leave cycling on highest. I'm not just go to the Tour and make a little farewell Tour de France, saying hi to all the people and medias and journalists. I mean, I have a lot of history. I have a lot of memories towards this race because I'm riding for performance. Yeah, it will be a fantastic, special last tour for me.
In his final Tour de France, there is no doubt Cancellara will once again take big chances. And if history has taught us anything, it's that Spartacus can never be counted out. Yes, now I wonder when we'll first start talking about him in this Tour de France. Chris Froome's the only other rider to have worn yellow more times, and he won the Tour de France. Cancellara winning 29. As I said earlier, these are the current crop of racing cyclists. 29 maillot jaune. And I can also tell you that Fabian Cancellara has consented to come to our studio after the finish of stage 3 for a chat as well. So something to look out for. Remember, 6 hours of action today by the time we get to the finish. And it's the blue skies and fluffy clouds. That, for me, is the Tour de France, Paul, not the rain and the wind.
Yes, well, I think I would agree with you there. And just going back to Spartacus, Fabian Cancellara, Phil, I wouldn't discount him having a crack at getting the yellow jersey in his last Tour de France. And I think if the Tour de France hadn't been going to Bern in the last week, which is his hometown of Switzerland, he may well not have participated this year. But, you know, I think he's got the form, as you've said just earlier, to do something special in this year's event.
And the Tour de France remembers its friends too, and I would suspect that they made every effort to make sure that Bern was on the route this year, because they were well aware that this had to be the final season for Fabian Cancellara. 32.2 miles an hour, that's pretty quick when there's only 5 guys setting the pace today, Paul, and it's because of the largely helpful winds, and it's going to stay that way all the way to the line.
It certainly will, but you can see if you look at the time split at the top, it's inside of 3 minutes. It was nice to see Lee Howard, the rider from IM Cycling, who used to ride for Orica Green Edge and moved across to IM Cycling just a year ago. And he's an amazing rider because he only got the phone call on Wednesday morning to replace his teammate Dries Devenens. He got his holiday planned. He wanted to watch the Tour de France in Andorra, because that's actually where he lives during the year. But he can go to Andorra this year, but with 198 other guys.
That reminds me of the story of Bob Roll, who crashed on the eve of the Tour de France, and Nathan Dahlberg got the nod and had to drop all of his wow, that was close. Got all of the shopping in for the missus, and then jumped the plane down to the start of the Tour. Well, that was You know, we've had a lot of incidents with motorbikes this year in the Tour de France. It is a hazardous occupation, but this one was a bit close. Just watching Kirienko, number 3 there, as the boys have come through the pack. But these are the best police, of course. We've had a loss of life on the Tour this year with collisions with motos and bike riders, and let's hope that is not repeated during the next 3 weeks. The Tour de France is a happy festival for everyone, including the bike riders. We'll take a break as we continue our road towards Utah Beach. Smith Eyewear and Helmets. Visit smithoptics.com to pursue your thrill. And by US Bank. Welcome back as we pan around the beaches of Normandy here and catch up with the riders a little bit to the interior, but basically skimming the side of the channel at the moment before we swing inland to cross the peninsula to finish on Utah Beach, which is on the other side of the peninsula by Cherbourg. 3 minutes 5 seconds the gap. Just good tempo riding, nothing terribly exciting at the moment. Lovely crowd, I have to say, and the weather is warming up. Out of our commentary position, we can see the flags here are straight and they're right behind the riders. We are going to be whipped up to one sprint finish that everybody is anticipating.
We just caught a quick glimpse there in that white jersey with the German flag around his waist there. That was Andre Greipel. He's got to stay as calm as possible on a day like today. He's almost got to count his pedal revolutions and hope that he can explode out of the pack when we come down to the last 400 or 500 meters. And his biggest rival will be doing exactly the same thing, and that, of course, Marcel Kittel.
Well, the peloton, they're huddled together for warmth. At 3 minutes 1 second is the gap, and there is Andre Greipel, who's just won the German Road Race Championship. That's why he's a different colour to his teammates, who are also wearing the correct red jersey there. Let's go upstairs and catch you with Paul Burmaster and the boys.
Phil, thank you very much. My colleague to the left, Christian Vandevelde, rode in the Tour de France 11 times. I'm sure there was a point where you really felt like you made it and you belonged. I know it's early, stage 1 for me, my very first tour, but I think I'm about to feel that way. You know why, Bob? You know what's coming?
Can't wait.
This is my very first Ask Bob Key segment presented by Proform. To submit your question, visit facebook.com/NBC Sports Cycling. Claudia would like to know what defines a true sprinter. I've heard commentators say Peter Sagan is not a true sprinter, yet he has retained the green jersey of the Tour 4 times in a row, by the way. It seems like an oxymoron.
Thanks so much to Claudia for that question. The expression is, if I'm not mistaken, pure sprinter. And that's a rider that only excels at the big bunch gallops that we see in the Tour de France and the other Grand Tours, where a man of incredible speed and nerves of steel is able to be the fastest man of all the peloton. When you compare him to a rider like Michael Matthews, for example, who is very fast, make no mistake about that, you see that Michael Matthews needs something like a hill before the finish line to be able to distance himself from Andre Greipel, Marcel Kittel, Mark Cavendish. Peter Sagan is an outlier. He's like an extraterrestrial. He's so talented. He comes around once in many generations. He can actually win bunch gallops, classics, long race like the World Championships that has lots of hills, can go in breakaways. He's won stage races. He can time trial. He's a very special bike racer. He doesn't fit the mold of a pure sprinter because he's so versatile as a bike racer. He can pretty much do it all. The only time he's maybe not the best is above tree line, day after day in the Grand Tours, in the high mountains. But otherwise, he's a threat every single day, all year long.
Well, a couple things. Yes, Peter Sagan is the most dangerous bike rider on the planet. There's no doubt about that. And to call him a pure sprinter would almost be to slight him, because he could do so many other things just other than sprint. And the other thing is that pure sprinters don't usually win the green jersey. It's more of an overall great bike rider who wins a green jersey. I'm thinking more like Sean Kelly, and you think that Zabel, for example. Now you see Peter's win this. He's won it every time he's entered the Tour, and I expect him to win yet again this year.
We're looking at live pictures of stage 1 of the Tour de France, 41.1 miles into the 117-mile course that will end right here on the shores of Utah Beach. I have my own Peter Sagan question here for my own little Ask Bobke segment. You said he can do it all. I've heard a number of people ask this question. I kind of had it myself as I first started to read about and learn about him. Why can't he win here at the Tour de France?
Like I said, the big mountain stages that come day after day.
Can't do it?
He's just a little bit too muscular. Even if he trained the rest of his career to excel at a 3-week Grand Tour, I don't think it would happen. That's the one mountain just too far, one climb too many.
And I think he enjoys his life too much doing what he's doing right now. He's a gunslinger out there. He shoots from the hip. He just reacts to things. And another reason why he gets always a second and thirds is because he loves to partake in every race, not just cherry pick one race in here or there, like tomorrow's stage, for example. Suits him perfectly. But he would rather be in today's sprint, next day's sprint, every day, getting those second and thirds, and at least being a part of the race other than just sitting back and only being a part of maybe 3 or 4.
And there's a pure sprinter on his new team this year, Mark Cavendish. Got a chance here to make some noise here at some point in week 1, as you pointed out, Bob, maybe especially tomorrow. As you just pulled off to the side. Is that a routine stop, or is there?
No, most certainly not. He might have a flat tire or a mechanical of some sort. It looked like he was going to get a wheel change or a bike change, perhaps.
There you go.
Wheel change to the back wheel. Looked like a flat tire. He was bouncing on the back. His teammates had already dropped back to the back of the field, so they've been planning that for a few kilometers at least. And we'll see how quickly it takes him to get back in the field. But every match you burn, that's a match loss, and you're going to need all your matches on today's stage if you're Mark Cavendish to beat Marcel Kittel.
But Cav has so much experience, he's not going to panic on the way back. A lot of younger riders will completely panic when they're coming back into the field and just hit the gas as hard as they can. See Cav just taking his time, waiting for those cars to come, get in the draft, wait until those teammates come, and then come back in the pedals. He's not even pedaling, he's completely relaxed.
Mark Cavendish, dimension data back in the race after pulling over to the side for a few moments. And as Christian pointed out, performing just like a veteran you would expect. Jumping back in, no panic. And you expect him to get right back into contention for a sprint at the finish?
Oh, for sure. I mean, he still has over 70 miles to go. He's really, like Bob said, every time you accelerate, you pay for everything, especially a sprinter like Cav. He has such a wicked acceleration that if he wanted to, he could jump back in this peloton immediately. But it's better just to relax, get in the draft of the cars, get back into that caravan, and make your way back into the belt. You have plenty of time. There's no danger.
A reminder coming up on Tour Primetime tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern on NBCSN. More of your cycling questions answered in the Proform Ask Bobke segment. To submit your question, we invite you to visit facebook.com/NBC Sports Cycling. 74 miles to go here on stage 1. On the other side of this break, more of what you're looking at. That is live action, live racing of stage 1. Paul and Phil have you covered on the other side of this break.
For the summer.
In theaters on July 8th. Well, that was a brief glimpse there of Utah Beach. That's where we're bound today. We're getting messages from our Steve Perino on course that, in fact, Mark Cavendish has smoothly got back into the main field after that flat rear tyre. As we look now at American Alex Howes, he's absolutely enjoying his first day on the Tour de France. He's in the lead group.
He certainly is, and important when you get into a breakaway group like this to collaborate with the men in the breakaway group with you. When we look at the age of the riders in this breakaway group, Anthony de la Place, who is the local rider, he's actually from the department of La Manche. He's just 26 years of age.
So the peloton not allowing this race to go. They've locked in at just on 3 minutes, so that's a good time for us to go down and join Steve Perino inside the race. Steve.
Well, with things relaxed the way they are, Phil, I kind of wanted to give you a visual of just how explicit some of these sprint teams are when it comes to dialing in a stage. This is the stem of Marcel Kittel. And on the left-hand side, you can see the kilometer marks. On the right-hand side, they said, well, we don't want to tell you what it means, but if I'm a guessing man, I'm thinking it's saying being on the right side of the road or the left side of the road. That's just to get close to the finish. When I was talking to the director outside, inside they were going over Google Earth, which shows a visual of what they've already rehearsed in the days coming in. And even more to the point, to add more detail, they take photographs of the explicit spots on the course where they are going to begin their sprint. Of course, they weren't going to tell me, but it was down to the very minutia to get Kittel across the line first. Every sprint team doing the very same.
Yes, and I suspect, well, that's the way modern cycling has changed, and how on earth they take that in at these sort of speeds, but they do.
Well, they do, and it's a whole build-up. We might just be looking at stage one here, but I know I spoke to Sean Yates, one of the managers of Tinkoff, the manager of Peter Sagan, and he said that he actually came up here early on in the year, and Sean himself was a yellow jersey wearer in the Tour de France. He rode the final few kilometres, and he's given all of that information to his team at the start of this morning. In fact, he was asking me when I called him, what's the weather like? What's the wind like? He wanted to know every last little detail before he could apply it. But he did say, like we're seeing out on the course, Phil, that it is really important, the weather position and positioning.
Well, there's a nice view of this camera on the bike of Cyril Lemoine in the race as we're looking from the front of his handlebars inside the peloton. This is the next stage of the future of world cycling as well. I guess in a few years they'll all be coming from the bikes and we'll get sound as well. But the peloton, the heart of the peloton at the moment for Cyril Lemoine, who is riding on the Ethics Quick Step team.
I think you meant the Cofidis team.
Thank you.
Anyway.
And there's a look from the helicopter now. 2 minutes 50. Well, they've pulled back 3 seconds, but that's just the way of the rolling road here at the moment. I suspect they know exactly where they are, and they're waiting to pounce. And with 114 kilometers to go, there's plenty of time in front of them. Starter here. Average speed of riders, remember we're looking back here, 23.8 miles an hour in the Tour de France, and the highest average speed recorded was that wonderful opening day by Rowan Dennis in the individual time trial, 34.5 miles an hour. Highest speed of the intermediate sprint, that was done by John Degenkolb, who's back in this race this year after a serious injury, and the average speed of riders up Alpe d'Huez, a massive 9.8 miles an hour. Paul, they'd have lapped me twice. And we'll be bringing you plenty more information courtesy of Dimension Data during this year's Tour de France.
Yes, well, those are just a few insights into some of the data we're getting access to. But at the recent Tour of Switzerland, we saw a number of the riders, Phil, going downhill at speeds approaching 120 kilometres now. That's in excess of 72 miles an hour. It really is rapid. And this is what it looks like when we are on board, when we get on board one or two of the cameras. That we've got two that we're trying out at the Tour de France this year. This is 197 Cyril Lemoine. This takes us, Phil, right inside of the main field. And the plan is as we develop, as we go further, to bring much more dimension and to much more data into the coverage, to also get right inside the peloton. It really gives you an idea of how close the riders are together and how much goes on during the course of a day.
Another first for this great race. Live pictures there from the bicycle. Sometimes we fed them in an hour after the race is finished, but that was a live shot from Cyril's bike. And you could see from his front wheel how close he was to his teammate as he rides along the road. Meanwhile, back at the front, as they say, these are the boys in Lotto. They believe they have the winner of this day in Andre Greipel, and their charge is simple. Ride at the front, control the breakaways' advantage, but don't catch them yet.
No, because when you've got a breakaway off the front foot, we've got this five-man breakaway which is established right from the gun, as they say in cycling jargon. It actually calms down the main field because you've got a steady tempo in the peloton, and nobody wants to jump across a gap when you've got a breakaway established, because you get stuck there in no man's land, and you're using a lot of energy in the Tour de France to get nowhere with no chance of being in the breakaway or either staying away from the main field.
Well, the channel there just being obscured by the trees from the riders. About 77 kilometres out from the finish, we will turn right and cross the peninsula and head over to the beaches of Utah.
Well, as we mentioned a little earlier, we're travelling mainly in a northerly direction, and you can see the diagonal line there across the peloton. That's the Lotto Soudal team at the front, with a number of riders in there from Ethics Quickstep, and the wind is obviously coming from the left-hand side of the road, and it's the right-hand side of the picture. This is the leading group now. They've got down to the job in hand, but they're not stretching out their advantage. You can see just on the right-hand side and the left there, the flags are straight out. If you wanted to get into some PR and marketing, this would be the best region in the world to have your advertising on a flag.
Especially that flag, because that's the flag of Normandy. Let's go back inside the race with Steve Perino.
Well, I'd like to add on to the theme of flags and the various unpredictable hazards on the road. William Bonnet of FDJ just have to pull off to the side because a fan let their French flag fly and it got caught up in his cog, and he was pulling frantically to get it to come on out. But he doesn't seem to be overly panicked, but not too happy.
Well, you say that, Steve. I once remember in the 80s, a rider we always called Thomas the Tank, Thomas Wegmuller. He lost Paris-Roubaix because a plastic bag did exactly that, jammed up his gears in the sprint finish now. So at least this guy's had more chance of getting back in the race. 2:40 the gap. These boys have settled down. There's no need to attack each other now. They're all the common enemy is the peloton. 2 riders from Borough. Funny enough, 3 teams in this front group have never won a stage of the Tour de France. So maybe today's the day, but I doubt it. So as the leaders continue on, there's a lovely piece of artisan work here in Normandy. It's 109.4 kilometers to go. Wish them luck as you continue having coffee on the west. Nice fluffy white clouds over the coast of Normandy today, and the sun is up as well. It's not terribly hot, but it is a beautiful day for a bike race. The opening day of the Tour de France. 5 riders, they've come together after around 30 kilometers or so, and they still head the race by a couple of minutes over the field. The field are monitoring their progress. There's no doubt about that. We've gone up and down about 15 seconds in the last 45 minutes. There's the names for you. The local man, by the way, is Anthony Delaplace, a Frenchman who comes from Valognes, which is here in this department, and he made sure he was in that breakaway today. Meanwhile, the peloton looks a little bit ragged at the back here, but they're doing okay. Well, as we look at those guys pedaling, you know, is it their own effort or is it a motor? Because now the big talking point all this year is about mechanical doping. Here's more on that from Steve Schlanger.
Yeah, Phil, it's an issue that the officials will be watching very closely throughout the next 3 weeks. And it's basically small motors placed inside the bikes, and they're attacking it on 2 fronts. One would be magnetic resonance screening, which they can do with iPads before and after a stage. You can see them doing it before the start of stage 1 here today with those iPads. The second thing they're doing, which is new, is thermal scanners. Those are out on the road, either on the roadside or mounted on motorbikes. They detect heat signatures coming from the bikes if a motor is running or if it's turned off. And they say that they will conduct up to 4,000 different tests throughout this race. So they're hoping it's a deterrent for anybody who might try it. As far as how the teams feel, they're all on board with the more testing, the better. They say the only issue that might come up with regard to the integrity of the testing would be bike changes. If a guy changes a bike during the middle of a race, how do you account for all those bikes at the end of a stage? But everybody does like the fact that they're moving forward and making progress with keeping the sport cleaner.
Yep, absolutely, Steve. What do you think about that, Paul?
Well, I think the fact of the matter is, as always, cycling is at the leading edge, whether it's pharmaceutical doping or motorized doping. They're looking, I think, harder and deeper into the sport than any of the other sports out there. And I think that's really been brought to the attention of all of us, really, with what's been going on in track and field. And we've seen from various countries around the world now, Phil, leading up to the Olympic Games this year, with the non-participation in certain sports from Russia, and, of course, the threat to Kenyan runners as well.
Yeah. But that guy on the mountain bike, he has to have an engine. He couldn't possibly keep up with the Tour de France without one, although he is being distanced at the moment. This is the rear of the main peloton. Remember, 198 riders taking to the start today. We've got 5 American riders in this race. One is among the 4 or 5 favourites to win the Tour, but that is 3 weeks away. the stories we will have to tell you over the next 3 weeks of coverage here on NBCSN. 2 minutes 35 the gap. It's just chipping the wrong way for those 5 leaders at the moment.
Another chance to get a look at the onboard camera here. This is Steve Morabito, who rides for FDJ. We had a quick glimpse in there. This is a bit experimental, because the big problem with bringing live pictures from the bike on the bike on the road is the transmission from those tiny little bike cameras that we've got out to us at the finish line. Now here you get a chance to see Steve Morabito's a little bit towards the back end of the main field, but this is what it looks like behind him on the road. And in fact, at the back end of the main field, Phil, you can see there are actually slightly bigger gaps between him and all of the other riders, where at the front it's a much more compact leading group. And you're starting to see now the overall contenders. I've noticed Team Sky moving up towards the front, because we're getting up to the point of the race where we'll line ourselves up for the first sprint point once we go through the point of La Haye, and then we'll take a swing round to the right, and that's when we'll start to pick up a rather big strong tailwind. The sprint you can see on the horizon. We go through the feeding point at Gouville-sur-Mer in a few kilometers time, but there will be a general acceleration coming through to that main sprint point at La Haye after 74 miles of racing.
So the riders continue coursing their way towards that right turn, which will take them across the Cotentin Peninsula and heading towards the finish. Still got a leading group, 2:35 ahead.
We come from all over the world.
As we look out today, we're now searching for those 5 leaders out front, and there they are. Huge crowds. We expected nothing less. Normandy and Brittany, these 2 northern departments of France, well, northwestern parts, are actually the most hotbed of cycling, aren't they?
Huge hotbeds. When you remember that Jacques Anquetil was the first rider ever to win the Tour de France on 5 occasions, he actually also hailed from Normandy, not too far away from where we'll finish on tomorrow's stage, and right the way down towards Rouen. But this is magical crowds here. The 5 leaders, Jan Barter, he's no stranger to breakaways on the opening stage, Phil. He was in the opening breakaway last year. Neither too Anthony de la Place, who got into the opening day's breakaway when that was back in 2011. But this is what life is like at the back. A little bit more relaxed for the moment, but the time split is still hovering between the 5 leaders in the main field at 2.5 minutes.
All the tributaries coming out of the channel there, as the riders continue to have the channel on the left shoulder before we swing inland, 77k out from the finish. And I don't know if we probably could have seen the Channel Islands just beginning there too, with Jersey, Alderney and Guernsey, the island which, although they're part of the United Kingdom, they're tucked into the shadow of France here.
Well, what an honour for this young man as well there, Phil, from the Fortuneo squad. That was Anthony de la Place. He's the regional from this stage today. He's actually from the Département of La Manche. The region is Normandy, but this department, and it's hard to believe, you know, after the Tour de France started back in 1903, that this is the first time ever it's actually started from this Département de la Manche. But for de la Place, it's an important day for him, 26 years of age. On one of the wild card selection teams, he's managed to get himself into the breakaway.
Well, there's the crowds for you as the flags are waving. They'll be glad of these guys down there watching the race, because they're going to protect them a little bit from the crosswinds. Beautiful picture of the Tour de France. Just looking here at the breakaway, number 77 there in that white jersey of I Am Cycling, one of the teams who's never won a stage of the Tour de France yet, by the way. Lee Howard, he's an Australian who got the nod just a couple of days ago. Here's what he said: my plan was to watch the Tour from the roadside, because the race will literally pass in front of my house at the entrance of Andorra, which is where the race goes, and has a rest day there on the course of stage 9. Instead, Lee, the wife can watch you arrive on your bike.
Yes, just how funny it is how the selection happens to the Tour de France. He wasn't really even on the long list, and it was on Wednesday morning, because one of his teammates, Dries Devenens, was sick, that he got the call to come up and participate in the Tour de France. So that was a quick suitcase packing for Lee Howard, who's a great bike rider in his own right, and in fact he's got a great pedigree on the track, and was for many years regarded as a future sprinter for Australian cycling.
Champion of France, Vichot, number 129, pulling that jersey on last Sunday for only the second time in his career. That's a sure way of earning your ticket into the Tour de France when you're the champion of France. And we just caught a glimpse there of number 109. That was Daniel Tekla-Heimanot, who shocked the world. And a little view there of the camera. That was on, I think it was on Steve Morabito's bike. And that's the camera which is giving us those, well, this rear view image.
There he is, number 124, Steve Morabito. That gives us a chance now. And this is going to be, I think, the future of cycling eventually. As we have more and more interactive television, you'll be able to press the button of the guy's camera that you want to watch. There it is. It's a tiny little thing, and it really is amazing, Phil. They've been trying to do this for many, many years, but this year is the first real year that we've been able to get right inside the heart of the Tour de France.
Well, it's going to give us some great imagery, especially when we get into the mountains. Just hope the guy who's got the camera on those days can keep up with the race. So as we watch the peloton get on with their job, let me introduce you now to the Fantasy Cycling Challenge. And you can sign up and select your teams this year thanks to Cannondale. You could win a Super 6 Evo High Mod Disc Ultegra, plus daily prizes like today's feature prize, a BOA Closure System prize pack featuring cycling shoes and an assortment of BOA gear. It's all at NBCsports.com/challenge. And so get your team underway. 3 weeks to see it succeed. So we're still on the shoulders of the channel. Soon we'll be going across the peninsula and heading towards what will be an intriguing finish today. These 5 still clear.
This is how Precision listens. Bose microphones that hear engine noise, then
It's the biggest race in the world. It's the Super Bowl. It's the World Series.
It's just the pinnacle of our sport. It's the one way you can truly measure yourself against the best in the world.
The 200 best bike riders in the world, all in the peak condition of the year, all with the consequences of winning and losing that much greater. It's not just cyclists that really watch the Tour de France, it's the entire world.
I started cycling because I really like to ride my bike. And the Tour de France is a race which asks for so much more than only riding your bike. It's sometimes just a very brutal experience.
3 weeks of just grinding, grueling day in, day out. Not only the 3 weeks, but you've worked your whole life for that.
Cycling is a sport where you can touch the riders.
You have no other race where you have that many spectators. There is no other race where you have so much stress with all the media. So it's very extreme.
It's so hard to control all the variables in this sport that basically are uncontrollable.
The race leader is down. That does not look good news.
I have a broken collarbone, but I still ask my doctor if I'm able to ride next stage because it's the Tour. It's the biggest thing in cycling. It's, for me, the best race in the world.
Challenge the elements, the other riders. You have to get everything right.
The most important feeling you always get when you get to Paris is when you come out the first time out of the tunnel and hear the crowds shouting at you. This makes me goosebumps everywhere.
The last week, it's so stressful. To just swear that it's going to be the last time you ever do. And you wake up the morning after it's finished and you can't wait to be back there.
Until the end of my career, I'm going to be, trying to win that race.
Yes, the 103rd Tour de France is underway. It started just under 3 hours ago on the opening day of 116.8 miles. Saying farewell to the island outpost in Normandy of Mont-Saint-Michel, we're bound across the peninsula to Utah Beach, which was part of the Allies' landing in June 1944. The race has been fast, and that's putting it mildly. We take a look now at the highlights race. Paul, the start was rapid.
From the gun, 3 riders breaking clear as soon as the neutralised flag was brought in. Jan Barter, Paul Voss and Lee Howard.
But it wasn't without the early incident, though, because Diego Rosa, in his very first Tour de France, had his very first crash approximately half an hour after the start was given. He was okay. It was one of many tumbles that rarely get reported as he got back on his bike and rejoined the race. Probably his pride dented more than his brakes.
Yes, but more importantly, Paul Voss in that leading group of 3, he had a little dream in the back of his mind. He was thinking of trying to garner the first leader's jersey in one of the competitions, and he led over the first climb of the day, the Côte d'Avranches, to grab himself a single point.
Bora, a team that's never won a stage of the race, was now going to have a leader on the team because he was 1 point over the Côte de Falaise-Champeau. Congratulated by his breakaway teammate Jan Barter, because Voss is the first leader in a leader's jersey in the Tour de France this year. He'll pull the polka dot jersey on tonight as the King of the Mountains leader.
Yeah, then they got down to the job in hand, and as we look at the 5 leaders now, Phil, they've managed to hold on to 2 minutes of their advantage. And that advantage is over the main field there. They're now making their way through what is going to be rather dangerous in the main field, the feeding station. It's always a nervous moment when the riders take on board drinks and some extra food for the last half of the race.
Well, there we are, Gouville-sur-Mer. We are at the world capital of the oyster. And I'll tell you, it's all fish food down this coastline, and we watched the fishermen bringing their fish home only as recently as last night. They were big.
Huge fish, but just looking at the front end of the main field there, you can see, if we look out to the sea, though, over to the rider's left-hand side, you can see the white horses there as they start to ripple there in the wind that's coming in. And we could start also in the main field, Phil, to see the leading contenders come to the front because of that feeding station on the horizon. Always a dangerous place.
Yes, it is. And as we begin to swing away from this side of the peninsula, we'll cross the peninsula, and that wind will turn to be full back wind, and they're going to fly towards the finishing line. So far, these high hedges are helping them a little bit, keeping the wind off on that coastline.
We've got Cannondale over on the left-hand side. The dark black and the dark blue and green jerseys, that is the team Movistar from Spain. They'll be looking after Nairo Quintana. You can just about see him popping in and out there in 5th or 6th position. The black and blue jerseys, that's Team Sky. They're looking after Chris Froome.
So, as they've got a job to do, they're just going to try and hold it. They're doing well at 2 minutes 7 seconds of the gap. The breakaway is going nowhere. Least of all, we're all going to the same place, Utah Beach. Back with the head of the peloton in the Tour de France, and now heading towards Utah Beach, and the riders here now getting their sprint teams lined up. These are the early season, the domestiques we call them, as they drive this peloton. They're containing these 5 leaders at 2 minutes and 4 seconds. There's the name for you: Anthony Delaplace, Lee Howard, Andy House, the American, Paul Voss and Jan Barter. Alex House, I think I said Andy there, sorry about that. As the 5 leaders here are clear, but they've had almost double this. They're under control, I think, at the moment. Well, in 1944 on June the 6th, it's a date we'll all remember. The Americans came ashore in 2 platoons at Omaha Beach and, of course, at Utah Beach, while the British and Canadians handled the other beaches along the front. It was a terrible day.
The images are haunting, the memories horrific, but the battle here on June the 6th, 1944, changed the course of World War II. Just a few hundred yards from the finish line of today's stage of the Tour de France is the legendary Utah Beach. It was at this very point, one of the 5 beaches invaded on D-Day, that the American troops began the liberation of France from Nazi domination. Unlike Omaha Beach, just down the road where thousands lost their lives, the Utah Beach landing was accomplished with a minimum of casualties. The American Army would land by sea and air almost 35,000 men at Utah Beach on the opening day. A strange twist of fate helped make the day an outstanding success. The American forces missed their original landing zone by more than a mile due to strong currents at sea. They landed at a spot with little German resistance. Nevertheless, almost 200 Americans died here, dramatically less than on the other 4 beachheads. At the conclusion of today's stage, the tour organizers will hold a memorial to those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. Tomorrow's stage will end in Cherbourg, where the heroes of D-Day took their first large French city at the start of the Liberation Campaign.
Yes, Paul Sherwin there, who wasn't born on that occasion, but over this last week, Paul and I have gone around these beaches, and that's Utah Beach. There's a museum just off to our right now as well, as we remember those brave men of 1944.
I tell you what, Phil, just have a quick look at this, though, because there's a big acceleration, and this is the thing that all of the riders were very concerned about, the crosswinds. All of a sudden, heading up towards the feeding station, slight acceleration. If you're at the back end of the main field, you're under pressure.
Well, the winds got in there as they slightly changed direction. It's a cross, and look at this now. Nairo Quintana, who once lost a little bit of time last year, 1 minute and 28 seconds when he missed a move like this. He's not going to make the same mistake today, is he?
No, he's not. He's got up alongside him Emmanuel Erviti of Team Movistar, and the reason is that he's going to nurse him through these flat stages, dangerous little stages like this. So when we spoke to the team just before the start of this race, they said Erviti is here just to nurse him around. He rode some of the one-day classics in the early part of this year to find out how you ride in the crosswinds, and certainly that's what he's paying for this afternoon, keeping the team leader of Movistar to the front, Nairo Quintana. But it just goes to show for all of the contenders, they're alert because of that, the strong crosswinds.
Ripping across from the left side of the riders now, and as a consequence, that lead of just over 2 minutes has crashed to 1 minute and 31. Pretty accurate, considering they're using the old board system to our computerized one, as these boys are now settling into a real drive. Ethics Quick-Step are there as well. This is going to hurt now. Riders have suddenly realized they're in the Tour de France.
I can see Daniel Tekla-Heimanot there, number 109. He's the champion of Eritrea. I'm still trying to get a few numbers. I think I also spotted Thomas Vogler. Yes, there in the black jersey. Now, he was sitting at the back end of the main field. This little acceleration, this suddenly explains to you, Phil, how hard it is and how quickly you can lose time in a crosswind.
Well, that looked to me as though it's Dan Limpy there in that group as well, in the new colours of Orica Bike Exchange now. They brought in a new sponsor days before this race began.
And you can see how very quickly the race organisers, they've only allowed a number of cars to come forward. That was the race referees got. You don't catch out this team, though, Phil, in the black and blue jerseys. The team from Belgium, Ethics Quick-Step. This is their terrain. Flat races, lots of crosswinds. They know how to handle this. And in fourth position in that line was Marcel Kittel.
Yes, the man who's won the first stage of the Tour de France. The last 2 times he's participated. 1 minute 9 seconds. It is crashing down now because there's a much more serious battle taking place as the main field are now attacking each other. It's crumbling. They're going to run up on them. I think a little bit earlier than they anticipated, but they've got to get on with the job now.
There's number 1 in the black and blue jersey there of Team Sky. He's obviously been attentive. That's the defending champion, Chris Froome. There's Andre Greipel in the German national champions. In the white jersey with the rainbow bands are in it. But Peter Sagan, he's also been very attentive. I did notice, though, that 1 or 2 riders from Team Dimension Data, which is Mark Cavendish's team, were caught out at the back of that split. Now, that could be instrumental when we come down to the final few kilometres and the lead-out train, which I think you really need today to win today's sprint.
Well, take a look at the faces. That tells the story now. These boys are pushing and driving this as best they can. The significant thing is that the projected winners of this Tour in Paris have got themselves to the front and out of danger. They're riding right at the sharp end now. 1 minute. Alex Howes there in the lime green tries to tag onto the back of the Australian Lee Howard. Well, these crosswinds are dangerous. The favourites are up for it. The gap is now down inside a minute. 58 seconds. We're going to come together very soon. NBC Universal. So, as we look down on the moated chateau here, we're in Normandy today on this opening day of the Tour de France. The wind is now having its say as well, as Team Ethics from Belgium, the team of Marcel Kittel, have got control at the front. They are riding at over 40 miles an hour on these stretches.
A few moments ago, when the main field, Phil, it was as if everybody was asleep. Then all of a sudden, they've got the crosswind in exactly the right direction. And once Ethics Quickstep saw the danger there, they took advantage and put a lot of riders into difficulty. We're now looking at the leading group of 4, but all of a sudden, from a 3-minute advantage, we've come down to just 40 seconds. One team who didn't miss out, though, was Ethics Quickstep. They want to eliminate as many of the lead-out men of the other sprinters' teams as possible in these crosswinds.
Yes, and how much damage has it done here? Bit of a tricky right-hand bend here. Well, there's a fall.
Been a crash,
there's
Phil.
a fall, yeah. Well,
In fact, the race radio is saying there's a crash. Let's just have a look here. There on the right-hand side.
Tinkoff rider. Well, that's caught some of the...
Contador.
Contador has gone down, shades of a couple of years ago. He looks okay, he's starting to pedal. Oh, he's ripped to shreds on his shoulder.
Well, in fact, Phil, that was right at the front end of the main field. That's why it is so important to pay attention and go around the corner. I'm getting information that Brent Bookwalter, the rider from BMC, went down there as well.
I think he's right behind him. He's right on the floor there.
Yeah, there you can see it. And you can see Team Sky, a rider from Sky, has gone down as well. And all of a sudden, everybody's looking back to see who have I got in that accident. Now, it's going to be very difficult to get back in because the race is on and we are at high speed.
Well, that was Luke Rowe in the black on his little radio there, telling the team that Froome was very, very lucky to miss that. The Team Sky were right on the sharp end.
And how rare it is, Phil, for that accident to happen at the front end of the main field. I'm getting information over race radio that Geraint Thomas has had a flat tyre as well, so he's going to be in difficulty getting back into the main field. How so very difficult it is, and tragic for him after a great victory by his football team, Wales, last night when they were up against the Belgians. Now look at this. Again, more panic on board for Contador.
A bike change. And a good push into the fray again. Well, this is really unlucky for Contador. You think you're riding in the safest place of the peloton at the front when the pressure's on. You come round the corner and you've only got half the road.
Sky just stopped on the right. Didn't have a chance to glimpse who that was, but Geraint Thomas, we have heard. This is Geraint Thomas. He's waiting for the team car, but sadly, Phil, the team car has just stopped a few moments ago for another rider from his squad.
Well, he's going to have to ask the question, where is the team car? Remember, looking at Geraint Thomas, he was the rider that wrapped himself around that lamppost on the descent into Gap last year. It was an horrendous crash, and he got up and he finished. Well, there's the back tyres flat.
Well, this is the problem, Phil, when you have two riders from the same team who have an incident. The car has to stop for the first guy. It's the yellow Mavic neutral service team car there that's changing the wheel. But you can see as a professional bike rider, Geraint Thomas has not panicked at all there. It's just a question now. He knows he'll either get back or he won't.
Well, he's got at least one Sky rider behind him. The team will try to slow the race down now. It's held the breakaway at 39 seconds, and it looks as though the breakaway is beginning to move clear again, because I think because of the nature of that crash, the peloton might ease back here. It was the riders at the front who were driving the pace who have fallen.
They've also got the advantage of the fact that they're actually turning away from the coast. They're leaving the sea behind them a moment. Now, this is Geraint Thomas. This is one reason why he didn't panic. He knows that there's a large number of Tinkoff riders trying to pace back Contador. But as I've said so many times, Phil, it's this traffic furniture nowadays that we've got all over Europe that just makes the racing so much more dangerous.
Well, these boys are for Contador. That's why they're there. They're his teammates, Tinkoff. And Geraint knew they were behind, so he's got a safe ride back to the peloton sooner or later. It'll be a tough chase at this stage of the race, though. It was fraction, but it's coming back to peloton now.
We're also getting information, Phil, that Voss, who was in that leading group, he's actually sat up, and he's almost about to get caught by the front end of the main field. When you see the peloton stretch across the main field like that, that means they've turned off the pressure a fraction. And I think the reason for that is not necessarily because of the crash, but we've actually moved away from the coast, and they don't have the powerful crosswinds. But it's going to be a different ball game once we go through the sprint point in a few kilometres time and turn towards the east and pick up that very fast, strong tailwind.
Yeah. That'll take us down to the finishing line today. This is Jan Barter. Let's see if we can show you that crash again. It was off that right-hand bend. Remember, the top riders were driving it. Watch the right of your pictures. They come off this corner. Camera's got to come down over there, and the first down on that gravel there was Contador.
Well, just looking at the way he went round, Phil, it was in fact his teammate going round the corner first. You could actually see he actually lost control of his machine. He lost the front wheel going round that corner.
And the rider that almost hit Contador and appeared to be helping him up was Luke Rowe of the Sky team. Wow, you see, you can't lose concentration. You think you're having a great normal day in the Tour de France, and this happens.
It's always about that in the early stages. That's why we talk about the sting in the tail. We talk about the mountains in the last week of racing. But to get to the last week of racing, you've got to negotiate your whole way around France through things like this.
Well, 1:39 of the riders behind, 38 seconds to the leaders. There are only 4 of them left now, as we've lost Paul Voss. The race goes on, of course, and the next along the course will be the intermediate sprint for Green. Welcome back. Well, this is Alberto Contador. He's just been brought back to the field after that nasty crash, and now it appears he's about to change his shoe.
Well, you never know what happens in an accident like that, and it could either be that his cleat underneath has moved, but he certainly wants to change it. He's got the team car very quickly behind him.
Taking the inner sole out for some reason.
Well, fortunately, he's back pretty much in contact with the main field, and he will have a spare pair of shoes in the bag. Every professional rider has a special bag. It's normally a wet weather bag, which will have an extra jersey in, a raincoat, and some warm gloves. But nowadays, they'll always have a spare pair of shoes in there as well. In fact, he's taken a spare pair of shoes, or a spare shoe, from the team.
Yeah. And we'll recognise him now because he's got one blue and one black shoe. Well, the team are really looking after him. Now, under the rules, they're allowed to steady the rider, but they're not allowed to push him. But, of course, I don't think there'll be any objections at the moment.
We'll talk about getting your shoes changed at around about 30 miles an hour. Quite impressive, the agility of Roberto Contador there. And I'm just looking, I know we can't make a prognosis at this moment, Phil, but it looks as if it's pretty much superficial. I think he was more shocked by that accident going around the corner than injured.
Incidentally, number 38 is Tossato, Matteo Tossato. He's the oldest man in the race. He's just over 42 years of age, and he's back here. As we're still feeding the drinks now, there's no urgency now. They've got it under control. He's changed his shoe. The peloton is still in sight. The car is doing a little bit of professional fouling, if you like, but I don't think there'll be a problem. Remember, though, the other end of the race, we're about 2K maximum from the sprint point, which is the first sprint for that green jersey. Expect to see the sprinters in the action. Expect to see Peter Sagan in the action, because Peter has won this competition throughout his history of riding the Tour de France.
Yeah, so we've got the race at the back, and we've also got the race at the front. We've still got that breakaway group. It's down to 4 riders in the breakaway group now, Phil. And now in the last couple of years, the race organisation have put this single sprint point on the race route to spice it up for the green jersey points competition. And that will be what Peter Sagan will be looking for. On the left-hand side, you've got the control of Ethics Quickstep. Yeah. On the right-hand side, you've got 1 or 2 riders in the dark red jerseys with the K on. That's Team Katusha of Alexander Kristoff. It's less than a kilometre now to go to the sprint, and at these speeds it's going to take them around about 1 minute and 10 seconds. The main field is just 30 seconds behind. There's 20 points for the first rider across the line, but there's 11 points available for the 5th rider, and that'll be the first rider from the main field.
Well, these boys are not going to be spoiled the pleasure of racing for 20, 17, 15 and 13 points, so that's the main points. and that reason alone might prevent the sprinters bothering with this, but we'll see. Because braking on the right is Jan Barter as he goes. Lee Howard chases him now. Alex Howes goes after him as well, and Anthony Delaplace is the rider tagging on at the back. But it looks as though Barter isn't a bad sprinter. Well, I know Lee Howard is a very good sprinter. Has he got the legs to come over Jan Barter when you check over your shoulder like that? The answer is usually no, but he's going to give it a second kick. And Lee Howard, who is a very fast finisher, has won the sprint point of the day. 20 in the bag, a good result for Lee Howard in his first Tour de France.
Yeah, but look down the road, not too far behind is the main field. It's just a quarter of a minute, and it's going to be extremely important to see who comes across the line there in 5th place. But the action is at the back here for Alberto Contador, being looked after by the race doctor.
And there's the peloton coming up as well. Well, Kittel got second there, but they changed the colours of the border riders there. I think I'm not too sure who got the win on that line. We'll have to wait for the result on that one. This year we got, I think it was a Giant Alpecin rider, but a number of teams have changed the colours, and like you, it's the first time we've seen them today.
Well, it's so amazing to think what you've got to go through to win the Tour de France, the ups and the downs. And this man, if you remember, when he crashed out of the Tour de France a couple of years ago, he got back onto his machine, and it was only afterwards, having ridden for about 10 to 15 kilometres, after he abandoned, we later found out he had a fracture of the femur. So important. These riders, the Tour de France, Phil, is so difficult to understand how important it is in the psyche of a professional bike rider. How much you want to stay in the race, how much you want to get yourself to the finish of each individual stage.
Well, day one, less than just over 3 hours into the opening day, and Alberto Contador has crashed. That's going to be a long way to Paris now for him. The peloton speeds on through La Haye. I'd like to say that was John Degenkolb from the peloton, and I hope it was after his serious injury. It means he's coming good.
Well, I think with just so much going on in this race, with the 4 riders going through the sprint point, the images we're getting are coming really from the back of the race, because we're talking about one of the podium contenders here, Alberto Contador, being patched back together by the race doctor. The race doctors do an amazing job at moments like this, because this is visiting the surgery, Phil, at 30 miles an hour.
Yeah. He's got he took a bad fall on that side, and Luke Rowe hit him, I think, and Brent Bookwalter fell right behind him on that central island. Such bad luck, especially when you feel as though you're riding in the right place to avoid the crashes.
Well, it's not a question of him feeling he was in the right place. He was certainly in the right place. He was in the first 10, 12 positions in the main field. And I think just looking back at the replay a few moments ago, Phil, that was pilot error. He was going around the corner, then he saw the traffic furniture and he tried to change his line. And what happened was his front wheel slid away from him. And both you and I know from experience, once you lose the front wheel, it's almost impossible to correct, unless, of course, your name is Peter Sagan, and he can do almost anything on a bike.
Well, we did note that Peter didn't fall down anyway. Boy, Joe, she's making a job of this one. And there's the next man coming to the doctors now, Brent Bookwalter. He fell alongside Tinkoff there. Our camera's moved off him. We can't control that, I'm afraid. These are the leaders coming back together. Well, they've achieved all the competition and all the prizes along the road. Now all that's left is the finish when we get down to Utah Beach. 33 seconds now, the gap. Looking down at the peloton, the Tour de France, a little calmness coming there now. Alberto Contador has got himself back in that heavily bandaged on his right shoulder. But back in the pack, these are the 4 leaders. Gap holding at 41 seconds. Now, they were about to be caught before that crash happened. Now they've gone out a little bit.
Well, they've led through the sprint point at La Haye, but I suppose more importantly, Alberto Contador has recovered from that accident and got himself back into the main field, although of late he's been at the surgery. And that's the mobile unit at the back of the race, where the doctor has been really seriously strapping his shoulder back together.
Man leading the group here at the moment is the local French rider Anthony Delaplace. He comes from Valognes. and he's not going to wait for anybody. He's going to stay up here as long as he can today as the Normands cheer him along. There he is. Nice to see a Frenchman enjoying his day in the Tour de France. They've got the most riders in the race, 38 of them out the 198 riders, so they're about 10 clear of any other nation as far as riders go. They've just got a time check off the board there. Well, as they just assemble themselves down there, it's time for the Road ID pop quiz, and you submit your answers to roadid.com/TDF. Here's today's question. In what year did the Tour de France last visit Mont-Saint-Michel? Now, I've actually told you the answer. I didn't know the question either earlier on in commentary, so I hope you were listening to what I said. There we are. In what year did the Tour de France last visit Mont-Saint-Michel?
Well, just looking down now, Phil, at the main field, it seems as if the calm before the storm. We've gone through the sprint point. We're actually cutting right across the top of the peninsula now. And once we get past the town of Valognes, which is the town where, in fact, the rider in the breakaway de la Place lives, we'll head back down to the coast again.
Well, as we head across the peninsula now to the other side, this man is hurting. Alberto Contador in trouble on the opening day of the Tour de France.
This is how precision listens.
The champion golfer of the year is decided. The one, the Open, July 14th to the 17th. We're heading across Normandy now. We are crossing from one side of La Manche, the channel, to the other, as the riders are now battling quite a wind here. These are the four leaders, de la Place, Howard, Howes and Barter, and the gap holding just at just over half a minute.
Yeah, but I think more importantly, Phil, when you look at the trees, when you look at the leaves, you can see them really ruffling because of the wind. We're going across the middle of the peninsula, and that gives the riders just a little bit of respite. But once we get down to the coast on the far side, that's when I think the real aggression, the real turning of the screws will start in today's stage. You know, 32 kilometers at speed like this is only about 500 meters, 500 yards in old money. And you can see the difference there really between the leading group and the main field. They're in their sights.
Well, one man down there battling the wind, the same as all the riders, is our Steve Pino inside the race. How's it going, Steve?
I'm doing all right. Much better than Bookwalter and Contador. Bookwalter, in fact, just went past me, and maybe you've seen it already with the back of his jerseys starting to split open. I just talked to the doctor in the medical car. He treated both Contador and Bookwalter, and he said it was strictly skin abrasions, both of them on their shoulder and on their elbow, but he said it was limited to the abrasions.
Wow, it certainly looked painful on our television pictures of Steve Pino there riding inside the race on a motorbike, keeping up with all the facts of the action. They're holding at 32 now. They're not racing up to these riders. They're recovering, licking the wounds a little bit, I think, back in that main field. 29.9 miles an hour, just slowed slightly. This is the result of a wind which will slowly turn favourable now as they race towards the finish. We're still 36, 37 miles out from the line.
Yeah, we're coming down to just inside of 60 kilometers to go to the finish. That's going to take these riders around about an hour and a half, but more importantly, it's when we get to the last 20 or 30 kilometers, that's when the screws will really start to get turned up. Looking down there, that's the Abbey of Saint-Sauveur just down on the horizon. It's an abbey which was really the result of the work of three major families: the Saint-Sauveur family, the Roche-Tesson family, and the Harcourt family. The original part of the abbey dates back to 1067. That, by the way, is just a year after they invaded England, the Normans, in 1066.
Absolutely right. Well, they kept that one in pretty good condition, I have to say. As we now go off in search of the Tour de France. There it is, running around the rim of that beautiful Abbey of Saint-Sauveur. And again, the crowds welcoming them in Normandy. The red flag with the yellow line is the local flag here for the department. So as the crowds get bigger and bigger as we race towards the finish, they are the leaders. This is the beauty of Normandy. Barter, de la Place, Howard Howes, they are the men leading the charge. Welcome back, and yes, there are only two riders in our camera shot now, because moments ago we had an attack. We've now got Alex Howes, number 84, and the local Frenchman, Anthony de la Place. Let's show you what happened.
Yes, well, the attack came once they started to get into the crucial part of this race, and it was in fact the local rider who's not very much more than 5 or 6 miles away from his hometown of Valognes, and then of course Anthony Delaplace in the dark black and green jersey there. He made the acceleration. He must know these roads. These are his training roads, and the one man who was very attentive, who stuck right in with him there, was Alex House of Cannondale.
The romantic history of the Tour de France is made with local riders and heroics like this. He'd planned that attack all day. He knew the road. He lives, as Paul says, just a couple of miles away. He's probably trained along this road for many thousands of miles. He planned that move and he's put it into action.
Such a special moment for a professional bike rider. If you get the chance to race right almost in front of your front door, it is such a special thing. It's something that happens quite often for the French riders, but for this region of France, La Manche, it very rarely comes into this part of the world, I should say, the département of La Manche, or the region of Normandy. But they've now got themselves established with a little advantage over the two riders they were with, Jan Barter and Lee Howard. But this is really just delaying the inevitable, I think, because once we get closer to the coast on the far side of the peninsula, that's when we'll start to see a major acceleration in the peloton.
This is the main field. They're just checking each other out, waiting for the signal. Marcel Seeberg on the front at the moment for the Lotto team, the team of Andre Greipel. Greipel, of course, looking to open with a win here. He's won every time he's ridden the Tour de France, at least one stage. Meanwhile, the escapers are giving it their best shot. A long way to go, but not as long as it was 3 hours ago. Some 54 kilometers, 33 miles. This is Steve Morabito's viewpoint from the camera we've got as we ride in the center of the peloton.
As you can see, just how much more compact the riders are as we come into this part of the race. It is very nervous in the main field now. Nobody wants to touch their brakes because they certainly do not want to slip back. We never really got a chance to see what the sprint results were like. We had the 4 men going through. We certainly know that Lee Howard got maximum points ahead of Barter, House, but in fact it was Greipel who won the field.
The white jersey of champion. That's why we didn't recognize it, because he's the champion of Germany. Kittel was there with 6th. Sagan was there with 7th. Big sprinters all just putting a few green jersey points in the bank. It's a competition, of course, which will go all of the way to Paris. .45 seconds just come up on screen. Bit of a gentle right-hand turn for the peloton. And these boys now are heading up the race today. The 2 survivors of what was originally 5 men in the lead. We've still got the other 2 chasing, but they'll be swept up now. 2 leaders pushing out towards that minute again. They're going to live as long as they can out front. Adam Hansen on the far left there of our picture, riding his 15th consecutive Grand Tour. He knows all about the long journey on the road to Paris. Let's take a look now at the Giant Bikes stage summary. The opening day in the Tour de France, the Grand Départ setting off from Mont-Saint-Michel. The breakaway of 5 riders getting away in the opening kilometre. Paul Voss will pull on the polka dot jersey tomorrow as the first leader of the King of the Mountains. Alberto Contador fell, has had medical attention, but continues in the peloton. Looking out now at the leaders, there are 2 of them going for it now, in Anthony Delaplace in blue, and Alex House there from USA. Well, we're going to have to take another break because we want to show you all of the finish today without commercials. It's going to be a super one, so we'll see you on the other side in just a moment.
There are countless not very smart
Peloton now becoming under the guidance of Team Lotto now, the team of Andre Greipel. He seems to be the one they're all shooting for today. And look looking at the way Team Lotto have got a grip now of the front of the race here, Paul. There he is, the man in the white jersey. Completely forgot earlier on in that sprint he was the champion of Germany once again and was wearing a white jersey. But he used that sprint just to check out his legs, and he was 100% successful.
And what's also interesting to note, in second position, you've got a rider there from Katusha. We didn't really talk very much in the early part of this race about Alexander Kristoff. He is one of the great sprinters, had an incredible season last year with 20 victories. This year, we spoke to the team just before the start of this race, and they said, no, well, we've balanced his approach this year. We didn't want to race him too much. We wanted him to come to the Tour de France fresh because he was a little tired in July last year. Well, that's not really surprising after the heavy season he had in the early part of last year. This year, he's on form.
As we look at the rear of the peloton, way out in front of them on the finishing line is our Steve Schlanger. Steve. Sorry about that, but we can't find Steve Schlanger at the moment, but we'll go back into the race if we look down here. Just notice right at 104 at the back there, that's Steve Cummings of the African Dimension Data team. He's extremely annoyed at the selections for the Olympic Games and is complaining that it's been selected around the Sky team, and he isn't a member of the Sky team, and he says, and few will disagree with him, he has the finest form of his life. So we'll see if he can deliver. If he wins a stage of the Tour de France like he did in Mont a year ago on Nelson Mandela Day, then we might have to make the selections different. 64 seconds is the gap. Peloton now speeding along, but at the moment the lead is taking advantage of this. Just the two of them left up there. 44.8 kilometers from the finish. And it's the teams now of the riders who carry sprinters, with one exception, the Movistar team, those dark blue jerseys in the centre. They're looking after Nairo Quintana down there, trying to keep him safe and out of trouble. The IM cycling team in the white jerseys here. And on the far side, Katusha, who carry their big sprinter today in Alexander Kristoff. They're getting it organised. Just 27 miles left to ride. We're going to rip the road up very soon.
Perfect fit. Customize yours and score free shipping at roadid.com/new. It might just save your life.
Yes, looking down now as we watch the peloton reorganise itself. The breakaway is still on. The gap is around 52 seconds now, so the reverse has started again. The team of the blue riders here, Ethics Quickstep, but they are the team of Marcel Kittel. Hot favourite to win today. He's done it twice before on the opening day of the Tour de France. Reminds me of the great Frenchman, Andre Darragard. Did it a couple more times than twice, though. And, of course, Andre Greipel's team are in red, and that is the Lotto team. Come back 2 more seconds since I started talking, so the chase is really on Montauban at the moment. Well, these are the two riders in front. Now, I've mentioned two sprinters. Another one is Mark Cavendish. He's won more stages than any other sprinter in the Tour de France. And here's Jenna Corrado talking with him at the start this morning.
Well, Mark, another start to the Tour de France, and today presents the sprinters with a rare opportunity to wear the yellow jersey, and really one of the final distinctive achievements for you to add to your long list of accomplishments. But you did follow an atypical program leading up to the Tour de France. So what are your chances today?
I honestly don't know. Could be great, it could be terrible, but we're definitely going in with a strategy to try and win it. You know, if it was the same stage on the 7th day, we'd still go on the same plan. The yellow jersey kind of makes no difference to the fact it's a sprint day. It'd be nice to wear that, but first and foremost we've got to concentrate on the sprint. Should be a sprint. Wind could play a factor today as well, but I know there's going to be a lot of nervous teams, but Team Dimension Data, we're strong and we're looking forward to it.
Marcel Kittel, many believe it's his race to lose today. What ways can you beat him?
Just gets that pressure is a bit extra for him, you know. That's how it is. He's won the last 2 times. The first stage and in the sprint he's won, so I guess it's down to Quickstep to have to try and control it today for him, you know. And like I said, I don't know how I'm going to be, so we'll see what happens.
You mentioned the wind. Anything else in particular about the course? We're hearing a narrow finish, fairly narrow finish.
Yeah, at least it's straight though. There wasn't any straight finishes last year, so the straight finish I'm quite looking forward to that.
Well, let's take a look at his win graph here. 2007, we steadily climbed up to his big season of 2009. But, you know, in total, he's got 26 victories. Only one year he hasn't won any. That was 2014. Now, the first year he rode, 2007, when he crashed out at that tour in the opening week. If he can just get 2 more wins the next 3 weeks, he'll become the second most successful rider of all time in the Tour de France, not just as a sprinter. So we're back with the peloton, clearly riding very, very quickly now, as the gap is holding at 40 seconds. Sprinters teams at the front left with Katusha looking for Christoph. The blue jersey looking for Marcel Kittel. Mark has a habit these days of staying away from the front until he has to come up to the front. And sometimes he doesn't get it quite right. But the finish, as he said, does suit him today. He loves a rough and tumble on a perfectly straight road. 38 seconds now is the gap. They're going to leave it out there as long as they can prevent anybody from chasing it down, because with 39 kilometres, 25 miles still to ride, a little bit soon to bring them back. Well, let's go back inside the race now with Steve Perino.
Well, Phil, as I was listening to Jenna speak with Mark Cavendish, as he's been deflecting that the yellow jersey and what it might mean to him. I can tell you that I spoke to the team principal of Dimension Data, Doug Ryder. Now, he's the one that really was the brainchild of this team. He dreamt about it back in 1996 when he was racing the Olympics to put an African team in the Tour de France. It started out as a local team, and he said the fact that they might actually have a chance to be in the yellow jersey today after a 20-year journey just to get a team into the Tour de France, he almost couldn't put into words what it would mean if they ended up with the yellow jersey at the end of the day.
Yes, it'd be fantastic for the team, and I think he's got 2 ambitions left, you know, a yellow jersey in the Tour de France, he once won before he retires, and a medal in the Olympic Games, and that's his plan in Rio after this race finishes. Let's see if it all starts today. We'll take a break.
Countless news agencies.
The determination now of the local rider here, Anthony Delaplace. He attacked on one of his local roads. He's been in the front now for coming up 100 miles today. Determined to show himself off to his fans. He's not far away from his mom's house at the moment. 36 kilometres to go, and as we start to warm up for the finish, 32 seconds the gap. Let's go and speak with Paul, Christian and Bob. What do you think, lads?
Well, we think 22 miles left. We've been waiting for the finish, for the excitement to come up. We're about to get there, Bob. What do you expect to see here at the close?
Absolute pure mayhem in the closing miles of the bike race. You can see how dangerous it's been already. Crosswinds, very strong at the coast. When they get back to the coast in just a couple of kilometers, then it's going to start to get set up for the finale. The sprint teams are going to have to be at the front, and the GC teams are also going to have to be there. There's just not enough room for that many people.
Same thing. What I didn't say in that little piece, or that's coming up, is that with the left-hand corner going through this little town is at 5.5 K to go. If you're not already at the front here, that last 5.5 K is only going to take about 5 minutes at 35, 40 miles an hour. So you already have to be in the fight. That's why you're going to see all those teams fighting so hard for this last 35 kilometers.
And the road all the riders are about to travel, Christian already got to know very well. Time to take a look at the Peloton cycle stage preview.
Organizers of the Tour de France, just like last year on the first road stage, have left it completely open to elements. As you can see around here, there's pretty much no shelter from the wind. Some may argue that Nairo Quintana lost the Tour on the first road stage. Today could be a dangerous one, just like last year. This final 2 kilometers to 1 kilometer right here, if you're not already in the front, you're gonna have a big problem getting up there. The road's not too wide. You're really easy to get boxed in. The weather forecast indicates there'll be about an 18 mile an hour, 20 mile an hour tailwind on this last stretch. So if the group is all together still here, and if it hasn't been broken to shreds in the crosswinds all along the continental peninsula, this will be a big, big fight for the finish line. A lot's on the line. First stage of Tour de France, yellow jersey, stage win. It's a big deal for a sprinter's team.
How fast were you going there, Christian?
I was going by myself. I was already going 60 kilometers per hour. So I expect these guys easily going 70, 80 kilometers per hour. They're almost 50 miles an hour on a dead flat road. But looking at these flags behind us, they are straight out towards the sea. So they're going to have a dead tailwind going down that last stretch. And like I said earlier, this is a very narrow road. You have to be at the front, especially with a tailwind sprint. That gives you the edge of leading out a little bit early, going on the air of, just don't be scared to get out there in the front and go early, because if you wait a little bit too long, you might run out of space.
You said go early. How early is going early?
Usually a sprint is launched in the last 200 meters. So I'm thinking 250. Somebody like Marcel Kittel has so much strength, he could go even earlier than 250 meters to the line with this tailwind.
Two leaders just about to get to the coastal road. The wind's been quite a bit stronger on the coast, and they have a few kilometers before they turn back in, a little bit calmer inland. But like you said, Christian, the last 3-4 kilometers, it straightens out, block tailwind, and the man with the highest top end is Marcel Kittel. Mark Cavendish, a definite aerodynamic advantage. Watch these roundabouts, this traffic furniture. It's just going to keep getting worse. It's very sketchy. Looks like the peloton's gotten through that one safely, thankfully. But Mark Cavendish, much more aerodynamic sprinter. So if there was a headwind, the advantage would go towards Mark Cavendish a little bit. Marcel Kittel really favors his talents as a sprinter today's last 2 kilometers.
Exactly 20 miles to go. We're going to take a short break, and on the other side of the break, Paul and Phil will carry you to the finish here at Utah Beach.
Appliances.
No, we just...
Built on the very beach where American troops landed June the 6th, 1944, the Utah Beach D-Day Museum chronicles the largest seaborne invasion in history. The museum features a robust collection of objects, vehicles, materials and oral histories that take visitors through the Allied invasion of Normandy during World War II. Included among the displays is an original B-26 bomber, one of only 6 remaining examples in the world. And that is right outside our commentary position. It's the building on the left, completely enclosed in its own private greenhouse now, and it is a magnificent example. As they speed along now, the catch is imminent. 10 seconds. They're going to be caught at around about 29 kilometers to go of 188. That makes it 159 kilometers in the lead today.
Yes, the tough thing is once they've had this little respite and a chance to look across at the English Channel over on the left-hand side, the right-hand side on the screen, they will turn inland for a little while as they head to that town you were talking about, Phil, Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, and that's when they will pick up a headwind, and that will nullify the breakaway, and that's when I think we'll start to see a major acceleration coming from the teams of the sprinters.
Yes, well, as the racing is now pretty much together, I think we should tell the story. Many of you will watch that film, The Longest Day, and you'll remember the parachutists hanging from the church in this beautiful place of Sainte-Église. And Paul, you were saying now that the people still remember that.
Well, they certainly do. If you've ever watched that movie, if you haven't, you need to watch The Longest Day. It's an epic movie with some great stars in. Problems at the back here, and this is number 97 who's had a slight problem.
Big Mickey.
Mickey Shah, they call him. He's one of the big strong boys for Team BMC. He should have not too much of a problem. It looks as if he's actually stripped his rear cluster there, because he was making a sign with his hands there to indicate.
Spinning. Yeah.
Well, just while we look at this mechanical engine, I'll just finish that story quickly about The Longest Day, because that is, if you ever watch the movie, and the guy who was stuck with a parachute on the steeple, well, in fact, to celebrate that, even to this day, a couple of times during the course of the year, they still put a parachute onto the steeple. And if you go and visit the church right in the middle of town, they've got a stained glass window there, which actually remembers the parachutists.
Yeah, very famous one. That was the most important crossroads of the D-Day landings. They had to put the parachutes in there to secure that crossroads and make the way clear for all of the troops coming from the wetlands and from the sea itself.
Many of those attacks, by the way, Phil, coming 2 or 3 days before actual D-Day, and the men who landed here were many of them part of the Special Forces, the SAS, and of course of the American Army Rangers too.
Michael Shaw noticed he took his front wheel with him on this occasion to put back in the bike they gave him. He's quite cool, calm and collected. This is Big Mickey, as they call him. He is such a great bike rider on Team BMC, which is an American setup. Andy House, though, he's the Cannondale member. He's an American, but he's being brought back here. 14 seconds. They're still leaving them out to dry. Just waiting. And the roads are about as wide as they'll get now, all of the way to the finish.
When you look at the main field like that, though, Phil, stretched down like this, they know what they have to do. They've got through most of the dangers of the day. They now realise it's going to get just a little bit more hairy as they start to move inland into the headwind, head down towards Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, and then they will line up. And that's the interesting thing about today's stage. Once they start to turn left and head down towards headwind, head for the finishing line in Utah Beach, that's when they will pick up this roaring tailwind, and we'll see incredible speeds today.
Cars getting themselves back in line.
That's Van Garderen.
Yep, change of colours, but it's TJ Van Garderen. He's been back.
Well, I'm just looking at the bike there, and he doesn't have a number on his bike. And interestingly enough, TJ Van Garderen, a little story about him as well as he gets back on there with the help of... Oh, crash at the back.
Arashiro from the Lamprey team on the floor here.
Well, you see, it's all nervous now, Phil. These are the moments. Look at that crash. And in fact, the accident happened because they were all slowing down to queue up to get around that right-hand corner.
And 6 Tour de France, Arashiro, Japanese rider. He was the first Japanese rider to take part in the Tour back in 2009. And he's always arrived in Paris. That's a very credible performance by him. So Yukiya Arashiro is going to get back into the action there for Lamprey. Shouldn't have too much of a problem. He's about to hook up here on the BMC train, who are taking TJ Van Garderen and Michael Shaw back through the pack here. The way we are going at the moment, with 16 miles left to run, we are going to get into town faster than the expected time of arrival of just after 5 o'clock here in France. I think we'll probably be in with a bit of luck at about 5 minutes to 5, so that's way up on the faster schedule. That wind certainly played well today. Well, they took no chances there with TJ because he had a mechanical of some sort, but they just whipped a new bike off for him and got him straight back in. So near the finish, you see. 22 seconds is the gap now. We'll take a break. We're 25 kilometers out, or 16 miles only to go now. Behind Despicable Me comes The Secret Life of Pets in theatres on July the 8th. These are the 2 men out front. They're hovering now. 1 minute and 30 seconds, then 26, now they're 27. One thing's for sure, they're not going anywhere just now. But the folk of Normandy here are cheering them on. Now we're looking at Arashiro, who we saw fall earlier on, a veteran of 6 tours. Finished them all so far. Just checking in. First Japanese cyclist to take part in the Tour de France. And it looks as though they're slowing down ahead too. Somebody has had a flat tyre, and it's a Katusha rider. He's got a front wheel flat tyre there at the moment. Now everybody seems to be getting a bit of problems at the moment. While we were away, this is what happened to Peter Stettner here. He's right up the road in the middle there, and he's ground to a halt. It looks as though he's... I'm not sure what happened there, but he's come to a standstill, and whatever it was, he's caused a bicycle change here, because this is the change for Peter Stettner, who loves to live the dream in the Tour de France, and this is his second tour. He's back in, having missed last year with his terrible injuries, fought his way back to Tour de France form. So we wish Peter a great 3 weeks. Now you see how wide that road is. Tactics can change. Teams can block off now. Nobody can physically get through to go to the front. And so the strong men have got control of the head of the race. They are now controlling the speed and who comes to join them. 29 seconds. They've slowed right down as the gap continues to stretch. Too early for the breakaway to think they might even get to Utah Beach earlier than the rest, but even so, we're running way ahead of schedule now. 14 miles to go. Well, it is a great finish, this, for a sprinter. There's no doubt about it, and we can find out more now. Let's go out to Steve Schlanger on the finishing line. Steve.
Yeah, Phil, and the tailwind is still ripping. It is flat. It is fast. It's the first day of the Tour de France, and this is going to be something in just 14 miles from where they are right now. Take a look at the run-in here from 3K all the way to that red triangle, which is 1K to go, and then the finish. It's all exposed. It's all flat, mostly straight. What the team directors were telling me is their big concern is that wind direction there, and that there's going to be so many nervous riders around some of their top sprinters. They're saying, don't be afraid to launch early, but keep in mind who's around you. They said it's interesting. One director in particular mentioned that this may be the one day of the entire year where you have the most talented, fittest, fresh, and motivated riders that you'll see all year, and they're all flying with the fury trying to get that opening win in the Tour de France.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Steve. And we heard from Marcel Kittel earlier, and when Jenna talked to Mark Cavendish, these boys are aware of the finish, but they know timing is absolutely everything. When you're riding at 70 kilometers an hour, 45 miles an hour, you can only stick your nose out front when you know it's exactly the right time. Otherwise, you lose. So we're in for a real finish today. There's no question about that. It's going to be a battle. Only thing I can tell you is a sprinter's going to win, and that's about where my predictions are going to end right now. 32 seconds for those two leaders. They've still got to catch them, don't forget. You see the teams are blocked off. This is the calmer waters at the moment of La Manche. And there's another view from our camera here of Morabito, as we have a little glimpse of, well, Steve Morabito is looking, he's a bit far down the peloton today now because he's at the rear of the race. So maybe Steve decided to keep out of the trouble today. He's not a sprinter. They're announcing 35 seconds now, the lead, so they're hovering and just nudging out that little bit. We're heading to the most famous town in Normandy, Saw now, as Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, where the crossroads were made for the American invasion. Well, it's all about finish. Sagan, the man who's won green every time he's ridden here. Greipel usually wins the opening stage, and he's got green. Kittel's won his last two first stages, and of course, Mark Cavendish would love to beat them all. It's all about the sprint when we come back.
Look out, Stringhead.
The Tour de France is a very old race. The jersey has probably one of the longest traditions in cycling, and to wear it for a day on your own shoulders is just a big honor.
The yellow jersey is, I don't even know what you can compare it to. I've never had a day in yellow, but man, I'd certainly love to.
The opportunity to wear the yellow jersey as a sprinter doesn't come very often. Even when it's there, you're not the only one who really wants to wear their jersey and to win the first stage.
Out of all the Grand Tours, the only leader's jersey I haven't worn yet. To try and get the opportunity to wear the yellow jersey on the first day will be a big priority.
It's special because it's this special jersey that is for 21 days there. On the end, you have to enjoy every moment you can with this jersey.
To have the chance already twice in my life, in my career, yeah, it's an incredible feeling.
For sure, it's a big goal for me. Yellow is the color of cycling, especially of the Tour de France, and I think my career was already quite good, but I can make it better with this nice color.
And one of the 198 riders in the Tour de France will wear yellow tonight, so maybe for the first time, as we're into the last 11 miles of racing now. This massive field blocking off the road, an American leading towards the beach here, where the Americans launched that attack back in June 1944. Alex Howes alongside Anthony Delaplace. They're still clear by 25 seconds. They haven't lost hope, Paul, have they, of surviving? We know the odds are almost 99.9% against them, but now Delaplace, he's going to show his home folks here that he's been very much a part of the Tour all day today.
Yeah, but the problem is, Phil, the reason they're continuing like this is because they've still got that slim chance. Something might go wrong in the main field. They will not give up until they can feel the breath of the main field on the back of their necks. But as they start to get that little bit closer to Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, they're getting closer to the left-hand turn where they will pick up that very strong tailwind. I would give their chances of survival at a very negative at the moment. Sorry to say that, because you always want to see the breakaway survive. But the main field, they're in neutral at the moment. They are not in full speed. And once they get into full cry, they've got no chance.
We've seen it in the past. Fairy tales do happen in the Tour de France, although I have to agree with Paul just now, I'm afraid. 17 kilometres, just over 10 miles, 30 seconds is the gap. That little flurry of activity from Anthony Delaplace nudged out a second or so. The peloton themselves now are bound into the last couple of towns before we go out into very exposed, barren, open countryside. That is the church, and there is the parachute that has made this the most famous crossroads in the world. "28 seconds. How's he sticking to his guns? His second Tour de France. Delaplace in his 6th Tour de France. They know the odds is pro cycling, but you know, the yellow jersey's the carrot today. The winner takes yellow. It's as simple as that. Jens, I know what you're going to say, but I'm going to ask you, do you think they've got a chance?
Well, the chances of a drop of water in hell, no, not really. It's you know, 10 miles to go, 20 seconds, you can almost see them. They probably can almost hear them breathing just behind them. But hey, once you start it, you might as well go to the very end of it. So there's no giving up, that's for sure. So you got to give it to the boys. They're not giving up, they're not letting the peloton come back easy, but the chances are very slim.
Well, we all agree, but we'd love it to happen. Let's face it, everybody should dream in the Tour de France. You never know when it's your turn to pull on yellow. 23 seconds now, that's all. The roads are now narrow. Still riding along with 25.5 miles an hour, 41 kilometers an hour. They don't look like it, but they're just blocking the road. That's the other tactic. You can use it here.
Well, you can. I'll tell you one thing, Phil. I'd just like to think that there's going to be a very strong, powerful lead out, because that will make the race, believe it or not, that will actually make it safer. If you've got a couple of teams do a powerful lead out train at the front, it will stretch the main field out into a very long line. And the fact is that that will actually, again, another attack, and it's Alex House now having a go.
Well, there we are, tit for tat, as Alex House launches an attack here now, but Delaplace is having none of that. He's digging deep, and he's going to try and run him down here. The two of them getting it back together again. The kilometres are ticking off. We're exactly 10 miles, 16 kilometres from the finish. These guys know there is still a chance when there's daylight between your back wheel and the peloton. There's the 15K to go.
Well, 15 kilometres now inside of 10 miles. You know, Alex House there, he was trying to catch the referee in the red car unawares, because I think the referee's driver was going to sleep a little bit, and Alex House said, well, look, if I can just use that to get a little bit of slipstream to pull myself away, there's always this chance. He will not give up until the main field are right on his wheel. But, you know, the main field, the professionals like this, Phil, they do not make mistakes, and they know how important today's stage is. They know how much of a chance they've got as a sprinter. Andre Greipel, Marcel Kittel, Mark Cavendish get across the line in first place. It's not only today, it's not a stage victory today, it's a stage victory plus a yellow jersey.
The peloton are under that same 15-kilometre banner. They're holding it 30 seconds. We're bound now for the town of Sainte-Marie-du-Mont here, the town that played such an important pinnacle role in June 1944, where the parachute secured the town, and 5 hours later the Americans came through, and so D-Day was on.
There's still no acceleration in the main field as they all wait for the moment. The thing is, Phil, they want to have the lead-out train, but they want to have the lead-out train that has got a lot of firepower in the final few kilometres. You've got to have 5 riders left. 4, 3, 2, 1, and then eventually you want to launch, almost catapult your leader into a sprint. Just remembering a story on the front here, Phil, of Alex House from Colorado. In fact, we talked to his team before they announced the squad. They said, OK, we'll let you know who's riding. And Alex House is riding, and he said, well, can I tell anybody? Can I put it out on Twitter? Because he's quite a Twitter fanatic. And they said, no, you can't tell anybody at all. It's a secret until the last moment. And then he said, well, can I tell my mum, please?
This is the town itself, Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, and a massive crowd has turned out. They've been looking forward to this day for not literally months, but years, as the riders now bring them through. The English flag flies high. Back out onto the road now, which will take them straight to the finishing line. The locals were extremely worried about that left-hand bend. They thought they wouldn't get round it.
It's not far now, Phil, from that corner. This left-hand bend now is where the riders will start to pick up that very strong tailwind down towards the finish. And still they haven't started to turn up the cranks, but it's still the two big teams of the sprinters. Ooh, look at that. It really is scary at a moment like this. But, you know, as a sprinter, you've got to have complete faith of your lead-out train. The man in front of you, you've got to just have confidence he's going to get around that corner. You don't even look too far ahead of you in front, but you're looking at the back wheel of your team lead-out man.
Fourth man down on the right of the picture in the white jersey, Andre Greipel, the man who's never always won a stage in every tour he's ridden, has never moved from that position. His 3 teammates have been setting the pace. They've kept him out of trouble. He just locks in and he watches the race move around him.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking, Phil, that all of Colorado must have got up very early this morning to watch this coverage. 6 hours of coverage here this afternoon. And for Alex House there, well, he's still in the lead. And he's still hoping to hang on to that advantage. Andre Greipel, well, he's got the right-hand lane now. He's in 4th position over on the right-hand side. Marcel Kittel, well, he obviously doesn't want to see what Andre Greipel's doing because he's on the complete opposite side of the road.
Well, Alex House here, his face doesn't give anything away. He just concentrates. He is an interesting character when you meet him off the bike. He's a dry humorist. But now he's been very, very serious in his second tour all day. Remember, he got clear in the first kilometre. Took a while to catch up with the leaders, along with De La Paz, but they did. And they're the only 2 survivors from that leading group now as they head down to the finish. They've been out front virtually all of the 188 kilometres, all bar 12. Team Sky, the men in black at the front, but basically to try and keep Chris Froome out of any possibility of falling at the front. Nice view of our helicopter right above the race. That's how you're getting your pictures.
23 seconds is not much more than about 400 metres, 400 yards difference between the leading 2, and they've still got a little bit of firepower in those legs as Anthony de la Place on the front there, local boy. He knows that all of these people around here from La Manche, they'll be shouting for him this afternoon. It's a real honour to be in one of the smaller teams and get here and get yourself into the breakaway. But to be racing on the roads that you've ridden since you were a kid is a special day for that young Frenchman.
He's done all that can be expected of him today. And now a little bit of a problem here at the back. And this looks to me as though it's Cousin, I think it is.
Yeah, he's one of the sprinters from Cofidis. He came into this team specifically with Geoffrey Souk to in fact be the lead out for Nasser Bouhanni, who had a little bit of a contretemps on the eve of the French national championships, and he was pulled out at the very last minute.
Boy in black at the front for Sky, Vasily Kirienka. He just sits as if he's in an armchair with his legs going round on automatic pilot, just keeping his team safe. He's not interested in the sprint finish. On the far right there, we've got Etix as they try to go through. Just looking down the men on the inside, Henderson, Renshaw, Sabatini are the riders on the left. They are the planned lead-out men for the final dash to the line of the sprinters.
Yes, and they are special men. We call them pilot fish, if you like. They're the last men in the lead-out train to try and launch their team sprinter into the last 300 or 400 metres of the stage.
The thing is, the sprinters have to follow them. and that could be a problem. Anyway, 2 riders still clear. The gap 22 seconds. Jens Voigt.
Yeah, well, coming this morning to the finish line, we noticed that there's 2 types of barriers closer to the finish line. We have the ones, I would call them a lot safer, but a little further out, let's say like a mile to go, they have this double-feeded barriers. So in order to keep the barriers in balance, they have a wider feet. And they unfortunately have perfectly the height that you can hook your feet and your pedal underneath them. I have seen a few spectacular crashes happening because of them. Here we can see them approaching the 10-kilometer mark. But back to the barriers, there's a spectacular crash of Jamolidin up to Shaparov on the Champs-Élysées was caused by that. So they are dangerous. And hopefully everybody knows that and they get around it and get safe.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jens. Porsche and I made the same observation coming in. Those barriers start 1.8 kilometers from the finish, and the feet sit in the road, and the road is very narrow. So let's have a look at the relationship now. The 2 riders who've led from the gun today when they left Mont-Saint-Michel. There's the peloton. They've got them in their sights now. 19 seconds, they say that is that gap. And this road, after this little kink, is dead straight to the Utah beach.
That is the big problem now, though, Phil, and everybody knows at 5 kilometers to go in the small town of Sainte-Marie, that's where we come into a small town. It's a little town square, and there's a chicane and then a hard left-hand bend, and that's the most dangerous point in the final 10 kilometers. Then it's straight sailing right the way down to the finish line, and if they do 400 or 500 meters past the finishing line, well, they're right on Utah Beach.
So the face now of Anthony Delaplace here, the local boy who's trained in these roads ever since he turned professional. These are his roads. Nobody's going to steal them from him. He grits his teeth here. He's got a good ally too in Alex House because he wants to work at him.
He certainly does. We're looking at the 2 leaders, but behind Phil, there's an awful lot of work going on, and never far away from the front is Nairo Quintana, casting his mind back 12 months, where he may well have lost the victory in the Tour de France on the opening road stage when we went right out towards the North Sea on that occasion, a little bit further away, but he's never been far away from the front on today's stage, and he's keeping a very close eye on Chris Froome.
Well, we never know the answer. Quintana lost 1 minute 28 seconds that day. 3 weeks later, he lost the Tour de France by 1 minute 12. 22 seconds, the gap. 8.4 kilometers, just over 5 miles to go to the finish. Now you can see what we're talking about. No more trees, no more hedges, just the crosswinds. In this case, a very, very powerful tailwind. The peloton are using the other tactic, blocking the road off where they can. The man in white we've been explaining to you is still 4 riders down the line, waiting. Andre Greipel on the team of Lotto. And on the other side, the other top German sprinter, and that is Marcel Kittel, who in his last 2 visits to the Tour de France has won the opening stage and won the yellow jersey. Quintana down in the pack, being guided to safety rather than thinking of a stage win here. His dreams of a yellow jersey put him off down maybe 10 days or more down the road to the Pyrenees or onwards to Mont Ventoux.
But it's so important in these opening days. These 2 riders, they really don't have much of a chance of survival in a moment like this. But when you look further back, these guys, they're just waiting for the moment to reel in the fish and then start the real wind-up to get themselves a victory on day 1. It really, for the moment, it's a fight of 4 teams. The left-hand side of the road is the team of Ethics Quick Step for Marcel Kittel. The right-hand side of the road is for Andre Greipel and Lotto Soudal. But right down the middle, you've got the 2 major contenders for the Tour de France this year. Team Sky looking after Chris Froome and Team Movistar doing a sterling job of looking out for Nairo Quintana.
And still Kirienka sits in the centre of our picture there, just seemingly just tapping out the rhythm, not even hurting himself at the moment. The Movistar boys just check him out. The new champion of Slovakia down there as well. As we're looking back to the 2 leaders as well, they're working their hearts out now. 18 seconds of the gap. They're matching them wheel for wheel here.
That's Froome there, sitting 4 from the front, all surrounded by his teammates. And Like I said just a few moments ago, Phil, you've got two races going on here. The overall race to win the Tour de France after 3 weeks of racing, and then the individual glory of today's stage. But it makes it very complicated because there's not enough space. We're actually on a fairly wide part of the road, but as we get closer and closer to Utah Beach, the road gets narrower. The road starts to pick up the barriers as we get closer to the finish line. And of course, the huge number of people who will be waiting for the race to come into town even puts that little bit of extra pressure onto everyone's shoulders.
Yes, these barriers start just inside 2 kilometres from the finish line, about 1.8 kilometres to go, and that narrows the road because they haven't put them on the grass, they've put them actually on the road. Now, the most career Tour de France stage wins so far, Mark Cavendish, of course, has 26. Andre Greipel is in there with 10, and Marcel Kittel is also there. But everybody talking about Greipel. He's the rider in the white jersey on the right of the picture, coming up to 6 kilometres out.
Well, you know, one thing, Mark Cavendish has done so much in his career, Phil. He's got a big dream towards the end of this year, and that, of course, is to ride the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro. But he's never had the yellow jersey. He's been a world champion on the track, but he has that dream of taking the yellow jersey, and as a sprinter you don't get that opportunity very often. He almost had the dream chance right in front of a home crowd, right in front of his mum when the race finished in the heart of Harrogate, and he crashed within sight of the finish line, and he was beaten by Marcel Kittel.
Exactly, and he's well aware of that. Cavendish knows his history and takes note of it. He knows this finish, he knows the sort of finish it is, he knows it's dangerous, but it's the sort of finish he loves here now. The last town before we head now in past the famous church in Sainte-Marie-du-Mont. The left-hand turn. The road continues now. That's the end of the corners now. There's one little sweeper at about 2 kilometres out. It's also the end of the breakaway. I'm sorry to say, 183 kilometres. Those two riders, with others on occasion, have led the Tour de France today.
It looks as if there's a crash at the back again. Lotto Jumbo.
Well, this was the corner that the locals were worried about, and it looks like they might have been right here. It looks as though it might be Timo Rusin.
There's a Direct Energy rider as well gone down there. This was the point that all of the team managers were talking about. You know, it's the only corner in the last 10 kilometres of this race.
So Timo Rusin, one of only 31 riders who are riding their first Tour de France this year, now sitting on the roadside here, and also gone down there. It looks as though it's number 56, I think it was, Paul. Oh, that's Timo Rusin who's gone down, yeah.
The other one is Angelo Tulik of France. More importantly now,
first-timer.
Yep, back to the front, because this is the most important part of this race now. We've got the team that have one of the greatest sprinters on the circuit, the new kid on the block, Marcel Kittel, over on the right-hand side. But the thing I feel, Phil, that the team Lotto Soudal, they have got the most experienced lead-out train, and so far we haven't seen anything of the black and white jerseys of Mark Cavendish's Dimension Data team.
No, and they've got to get him through because it's very difficult to guide your man through. They're on the left-hand side, actually. They've got that sort of black blob from the helicopter, and the rider in the Norwegian flag there, Bosenhagen, he's on the same team as well. He's the champion again of Norway. As we switch over both sides of the road, the two big sprint teams, our two principal favourites, Kittel and Greipel, have got command at this moment in time. You can virtually feel the energy coming out of that bunch now as the sprinters try to maintain the position, let nobody else onto the game. I'm hesitating. I'm watching Greipel down there. He's trying to be pushed off his wheel. He's not having any of it.
Yes, but on the other side, there's another white jersey with bands around the middle, right on the wheel of Marcel Kittel, and that is the man we don't really regard as a pure sprinter. That, of course, Peter Sagan, but he knows how to freelance his way through a situation like this, and he has picked, I think, the wheel of Marcel Kittel for his chance to get himself a stage victory today.
Will it be the right wheel? We've been told that Peter is going to go for it today, even though we always say he's not a pure sprinter. And this is, I think, a pure sprint finish. But we'll find out as we continue into the last 2.5 kilometres to go. And Lotto Jumbo are beginning to burst onto the scene. They have a secret sprinter.
They certainly do. That's Dylan Groenewegen. He's the third-place rider on the right-hand side there. He's just recently been crowned the champion of Holland, and that's why his team has come to the front.
Wow.
This is the moment you have to have your nerves. You have to wait for the right moment to make that acceleration. But this is also the kind of sprint, Phil, where we're looking now. I told you we're going to be looking at speeds approaching 70 kilometres an hour. We're doing faster than 40 miles an hour now.
We're going to hit 50 miles an hour if we keep this up, and that's 80 kilometres an hour, because this wind, once we get on the last 2 kilometres, there's nothing, only the fields here as we head directly towards the museum on Utah Beach. And if they don't stop, then they go into La Manche. And the drive for Katusha now, their big sprinter, Alexander Kristoff, is who they're thinking of.
Yeah, Kristoff, his team has the red jersey with the K right in the middle. Now, all of a sudden, Dimension Data have got themselves organised. 1, 2, 3, 4 riders from Dimension Data. It's Edvald Bosenhagen is right in there, and he's about to take over control at the front. And that, of course, is for Mark Cavendish. You've got to keep organised. We're now, the next banner they will see, Phil, will be the red kite. 1 kilometre to go to the finish. And it's going to take them at these speeds 1 kilometre in a minute.
I reckon faster, Paul, about 47, 50 seconds in that last kilometre, because they're going to get the full benefit of the wind. They're into the barriers now, but they're going so fast, and they're under a kilometre to go. They've dragged this race into such a long line. Now your winner is in the first 10 or 15 riders. That's the way it's going to be as they line up for the finish. Now Katusha is trying to get Alexander Kristoff in on the action, but it's the blue jerseys of Ethics who are looking now to try and bring home. Marcel Kittel is in a very good position at the moment. Dimension Data is there. Cavendish is there, about 5 men down. And that's all. There's a crash on that corner as they all fan out. A lot of riders have gone down, but it won't hurt the rider at the front here. Renshaw goes. Where's Mark Cavendish? Not on his wheel as they open up for the line now. Peter Sagan coming on the left. Marcel Kittel in the centre in blue. This is going to be an amazing result here for the world champion, or is it? As they close in on the line, it is still coming up towards the line. It looks to me as though this is Cavendish on the line. It's going to go down to the photo, but that is an exceptional ride by Mark Cavendish.
Well, he has dreamed about this, Phil, for so many years. He's had a couple of occasions. He tried it in Corsica. He tried it in Harrogate, but now all of a sudden he got everything right on the day.
We'll take a look at that again, Paul. But Mark Cavendish has just got his first of 2 ambitions this year. There has been quite a heavy fall there. One of the border riders is down. The presentation. Here's the happiness of the finish, though. Mark Cavendish had 2 ambitions. One was to come yellow and one was to win a medal in the Olympics. He's got yellow.
The Katusha rider went down first, very hard indeed. I think the rider who went down from Bora Argonville was the Irish rider, Sam Bennett. But there you've got the top men in the sport. Cavendish ahead of Kittel, over on the right-hand side, Andre Greipel, and not far away, Brian Coquart, and in the mix as well, Peter Sagan.
Wow, it's all about getting it right. Well, poor old Bennett there, one of only a couple of Irish riders in the race. He is the sprinter, and he was right up amongst it there. For a while it looked as though Peter Sagan was going to do something, then through on the rails, that familiar crouch finish of Mark Cavendish coming through clearly. Kittel was at full speed and couldn't really open it up, and as they came up to the line, all the men we mentioned were there. Cavendish was the best. Well, let's have a look. They were all sprinters. The best sprinters in the world contested that. Cavendish got the best of them. Win number 27 in the Tour de France. Kittel has got a win there, a second place rather. Peter Sagan third, the world champion. Greipel fourth. And Ed Turns in his first Tour de France. He's a fast rider, a name you should watch out for Trek. He was over the line in 5th place. Well, I must say that was a great finish. And remember that coming up in our GMC post-race, the podiums, the interviews, the highlights, the updated standings. What a great first day of the Tour de France. I hope Bennett is okay, because he's a great sprinter as well. We'll take a break. I'll tell you what's coming up, so don't go away. We'll see you in a moment. The Tour de France on NBCSN is brought to you by Peloton. Join studio cycling classes from the comfort of home. By JensenUSA.com. Road bikes, parts and accessories at JensenUSA.com/tour. Keep pedaling. And by the Boa Closure System.
Welcome to the Tour de France post-race report, presented by GMC.
And it's not that the first 116 miles, stage one of the Tour de France, didn't count. It's just that the final mile certainly provided the most excitement and the most suspense. Mark Cavendish, 26 times a stage winner, but for the very first time today, he earns the yellow jersey by besting Peter Sagan and Marcel Kittel at the finish. Thanks for being with us. Paul Burmeister alongside Bob Roll and Christian Vandeveld. Just before the race started, Mark Cavendish told our Jenna Corrado, it could be great today, it could be terrible, and I think he was onto something with that first thought. What a finish for him.
A spectacular sprint by Mark Cavendish. It was a big question mark whether his preparation throughout the year would serve him in a Tour de France sprint. He's been working on the track with the British track team, getting ready for the Olympic Games. He wants to get a gold medal, a yellow jersey, and a rainbow stripes as world champion. So mission accomplished. His first goal, yellow jersey. I'm really surprised, actually.
Yeah, we had our doubts, didn't we? We up here, especially listening to Cav's interviews. But then after his interviews, I started thinking about what was his preparation. His preparation on the track. And this is one of the fastest sprints I think I've seen in years. So if you're hitting 70K an hour, 80K an hour, you saw some of these guys completely turning out their gears, higher revolutions, over 120 RPM on the 53.11. It's a perfect preparation, actually, to be doing the track. So in hindsight, it was right, but I don't think he even had the confidence in himself coming into this first stage. And now he has a yellow jersey that has been completely elusive to him after all the stage wins he's already had.
A sense of real excitement from both of you guys about the way it finished, and also an excitement for him getting it done the way he did, but also some surprise. Are you really surprised that he was able to get it done?
I'm genuinely surprised.
What surprises you the most about it?
Because he struggled so much against Kittel, and Kittel seemed so dominant on the first day especially. He beat him handily in Harrogate and a couple of years ago, and so Cav seemed to be a desperate man in those situations. He had beaten him in Corsica for the yellow jersey, and it's very rare that a sprinter gets a chance to have the yellow jersey. You have to win the first stage. So I think that the way he changed his program throughout the year, maybe a little bit less pressure, and he just came into the race just seeing what he could do. And he can win when he has not a lot of pressure, and great lead out also from Mark Renshaw. Oh my God, that was so perfect.
We're going to take a look here as we begin the final mile. And Christian, you told us you really anticipated, you didn't want it to happen, but you anticipated a crash, and that's kind of how that final mile started.
Yeah, especially with these barriers getting a little dicey. I mean, I measured it this morning. It was only a little over 5.5 meters wide, so about 16, 17 feet. So that crash happens right into those barriers, which also protects the spectators, but man, that is really bad. I mean, you almost knew what was going to happen. As we were driving our cars down here, we all had this sense of, oh man, this is almost like this is a cage match. You're thinking more like WWF style, and so you never want to see the guys go out there. You never want to see any harm or ill will, but it ended up being an amazing sprint. I don't think it really hampered any of the guys who were going to be going for the win today, but it was definitely scary. You don't want to see that happen. But Mark Cavendish, like Bob was saying, Mark Renshaw, dropping him off at the right time. That's a winning combination that's been winning for many years, all the way back to 2008 HTC, where they started racking them up, 2008, 2009, 2010. And you see here, though, this is where we thought was going to happen. Marcel Kittel was going to pass Peter Sagan. He was going to keep on going. We did not see Mark Cavendish having this Turner speed in the last 150 meters. This is the Mark Cavendish of old. Back in the day, there was no one who could beat him in the last 50 meters. He was always the quickest. And to see him here gives me a lot of hope for him, especially going into Rio, getting that gold medal.
Clean wheels by Cavendish. I mean, that's an emphatic win. That's not even close.
No.
In the sprint game, that is a dominant performance. Puts Greipel into fourth, Kittel into second. Peter Sagan had a good shot at it, saw the finish line, dove for it. But Mark Cavendish, what he had is that acceleration to speed, that instantaneous up to speed from pedaling very quickly, and then when he jumps in the day, he is unstoppable, and that was the Mark Cavendish of old. We haven't seen that in a long time.
And just like you said, that was no fluke. That was not by mistake. That was a massive win at those kind of speeds.
You saw the emotion from Cavendish. You've heard the names. Star-studded finish, Cav, just ahead of Marcel Kittel, Peter Sagan, and also Andre Greipel. From 6 through 10. And again, Mark Cavendish with his 27th stage win, the very first time he will wear yellow in his Tour de France career. Just after that victory, here he is speaking backstage.
Mark, it was proverbial. All these stage wins and never the yellow jersey. Today you've done it. How does it feel?
Oh, it's phenomenal. It really is phenomenal, you know. Yeah, it's the third opportunity, third one without bad luck, you know. I don't know. I don't really know what to say, you know. It was a big goal. We came here with the aim of doing it with Dimension Data. The team had a polka dot jersey for a few days last year, and we wanted this, you know. There's no big icon in cycling, the yellow jersey, and here we get the recognition for our sponsors and for the Quebec charity. There's no bigger stage than wearing the yellow jersey with that, so yeah, I do this for my team. I do it for the continent of Africa, and yeah, I do it to try and get 5,000 kids on bicycles. So you know, I'm so happy with that. Here's my little girl. I can't believe it. She's been here both times, and I tried to get it, haven't you? And what am I going to get you? What does Daddy win you? Flowers. So you're happy? Yeah.
Mark, speaking of great cycling icons, there were you alongside Marcel Kittel. It's happened before, it hasn't gone well for you today. You've beaten him. How good does that feel?
It's regardless of who's there, you know. The Tour de France is a Tour de France. To win a stage is incredible, you know, and to pull on this jersey, it's an honour I've never got to do before, and yeah, I'm a little bit emotional for it, you know. It's going to be a special day tomorrow, you know, and what better way to do it here at Utah Beach, you know, remembering not just the soldiers that died in D-Day, but all the people who've died, you know, fighting for our freedom in the modern world. So it's quite fitting here, and it's an honour of them as well. So.
Mark, well done. Thank you very much.
Well, very few of us will ever know what it's like to earn the yellow jersey, but we can all, as parents, think about what it would feel like to share an accomplishment like that with one of your children on your lap, and that's pretty cool. So, guys, I want you both to finish this sentence for me. Christian, you can follow Bob. Mark Cavendish will wear yellow for the first time tomorrow because
he earned it. He's one of the fastest, man. He's one of our big three sprinters. Greipel, Kittel, Cavendish. He seemed to me to be the most vulnerable. But he did the work, he followed his teammates, he was patient, and he reinvigorated his talent, what he's best at, and that's accelerating. And everybody was queued up on his wheel. But when he hit the afterburners, boom, he went right past Sagan and Kittel.
Take a look there. Mark Cavendish, his daughter Delilah, there with him. Stage winner for the 27th time and for the first time in yellow. So, Christian, the way you saw the finish there, the biggest reason he earned that yellow for the first time.
Really just thinking back in hindsight of the preparation that he's done for Rio, getting back on the track. I mean, I had dinner with Mark during the Tour of California. He's like, well, what are you doing next week, man? He's like, I got to get back on the track in Manchester next Thursday. I'm like, I'm not looking forward to it. It's horrible. We work so hard there that we don't see the light anymore. But it's the kind of work that you need to keep on putting in if you want to get gold medal now. The standards are so high, especially within the GB cycling program. So I think that kind of work, that's what gave him this yellow jersey.
Good looking shot there. Utah Beach, Mark Cavendish earning that yellow jersey for the very first time. And the early look at the standings, Kittel, Sagan, and Greipel just behind Cav as we head into stage 2. And here's how it reads, 6 through 10. As stage 2 will finish up tomorrow, just a little bit north in Cherbourg. Live look at the podium, waiting for Mark Cavendish, the winner today, to make his way there. as he'll wear yellow tomorrow for the first time in his career. 31 years old, would mean a lot to any one of these riders. 198 starting today, but especially for someone now in his 30s. And Mark Cavendish saying of the 2015 Tour de France, that was the hardest tour I've ever done. So the age up there a bit. Last year didn't go anywhere near the way he wanted it to, just adding to what it means to him here today.
Number 27 for Mark Cavendish, maybe the sweetest of all of them, because along with that comes the yellow jersey, and like he said, an appropriate place to get the yellow jersey. Stand on the top set of the, yeah, that's as good as bike racing gets right there.
Great crowd, very well-known winner. Excellent weather here today, enjoying all of it here at Utah Beach.
Flat tire earlier, didn't panic, came back through the cars nice and steady, moves one stage win within Bernard Hinault, the Badger. 27 wins for Cavendish. That is absolutely awesome.
1 away from tying Bernard at number 2, and 7 away from reaching the heights of Eddie Merckx up there at number 1. So Mark Cavendish is your winner. A couple other big names right there with him. Peter Sagan coming in 3rd, Marcel Kittel at number 2. First and foremost, we give credit to Mark Cavendish, but in 2nd with Kittel, 3rd and Sagan. Did they do anything? Did they fail in any way down the stretch?
I think Marcel Kittel will be very disappointed with his sprint today in the last couple of 100 meters. Generally, when he goes at that point, he had a perfect lead out. And I think when he gets to the dinner table and has to look at his teammates, and having lost to Cavendish or anybody, he'll be very disappointed. For Peter Sagan, that's a pretty good sprint. He's always up there.
He's always up there. He's always there. He's always getting the doubles and triples. He's always there. Maybe not always home runs, but he's always there. He has the best batting average of anyone. Absolutely. I mean, but you have to think back. Marcel Kittel, this is the first time he's failed at doing this. He's won 2 out of 2 already, so this is the 3rd. 2 out of 3 is not so bad. We'll take that. But yeah, looking forward to tomorrow. I think it's going to be hard for him, Mark Cavendish, that is, to retain that yellow jersey with this uphill sprint. And I think that lays right into the hands of good old Peter Sagan.
Yeah, Peter Sagan's used to wearing that green jersey. Might hurt a little extra, not only losing at the finish, but seeing someone else put on that green.
I think Sagan will be pleased with his day today. He got intermediate time, not time, but points at the intermediate sprint and 3rd on the stage. That's a good day out for Peter Sagan. He's got the long game for the green jersey. And I would hate to have to race against Sagan for the green jersey in the way the points are laid out in the Tour de France these days.
Sagan coming in 3rd overall today. As for the green jersey, the one he has won each of his 4 previous Tour de France. Number 1, Mark Cavendish. You just saw him put it on after he put on the yellow. Kittel at 2, and Sagan right now at 3. Greipel and Howard coming in at 4 and at 5. Happy day to be anywhere inside that Cavendish family. His wife, we saw his daughter Delilah earlier enjoying the moment with Mark Cavendish.
I'm pretty sure that he's been promising her a yellow lion, which you get when you have the yellow jersey. Yeah, that's what he was referring to during the interview. And the flowers. So can you imagine being a little kid and getting all of that? That's fantastic.
Polka dot jersey for the King of the Mountains.
Early breakaway with a teammate. The tactics they employed were very impressive. Sat on the one man that could compete against that. That was Lee Howard early in the day, 2 Cat 4s, and sent this man, Paul Voss, up the road and got both of them. So a bit of a no-brainer. Might be tough to keep tomorrow, a Cat 3 to the finish line. But for Bora, this is a huge result. One of the invited teams, not a World Tour team, not an automatic selection, and they get the polka dot jersey. For any of the smaller teams to be in any of the jerseys at any time is huge for the sponsorship. So a good day for Paul Voss.
We talked about what it would mean for Cavendish, or what it does mean at age 31. Voss, age 30, from Germany, never won a stage or a jersey. What a day he had this afternoon.
Oh, that's huge. Getting that out there, like Bob was saying, very intelligent ride by both him and his team, attacking Lee Howard. Lee Howard probably has I know he has a better sprint sprint out of the two of them. So these aren't the biggest climbs in the world. So it really is more of the guy who's a punchier rider. So Paul getting up at the front, getting those points. Great day for Bora. Getting up there, getting a jersey, going home with, maybe even try to retain it tomorrow.
Got to ask for a clarification on what it means to be a punchy rider.
Punchy, just being a little bit more, being able to have a little bit more sprint. Like me, I couldn't sprint myself out of a wet paper bag, but these guys go, they're pretty quick.
Best young rider, I believe this is going to be given to Edward Toons. I was surprised to see him up in the sprint. Then when I reminded myself that he's one of the young rider competitors, and he is a very fast sprinter, right on his wheel was De Laporte, another young rider that you never see in the sprint. So heads up riding by the youngster on the Trek squad, and he'll be in the white jersey. He might keep that for a few days. He might not. All the way to Paris, very unlikely when all the mountains are said and done. But for tomorrow, he'll be in the white jersey. That's a great result.
Yeah, looking down the standings of another young rider in the GC, Warren Barguil in 13th place. I don't know if that's ignorant or genius right there. Being up in that kind of sprint, being up there, a little skinny guy. I don't know about that, but Warren was up there in 13th, safe and sound.
Take a look at the standings for the white jersey, the best rider 25 or under. And Christian, you spent a little time around the white jersey back in your day, didn't you?
Yeah, they didn't have enough money for a jersey, so they just gave me flowers. But yes, I was in there for quite a while.
Quite a few years ago.
Quite a few years ago, too. Thanks for the reminder, Paul. Appreciate that.
See the sunshine. If it looks like a perfect day, it really turned out that way. And I go back to just a day ago, guys. It was windy. It was rainy. It was pretty cold. And we talked a lot. In fact, our lead story yesterday was what effect will the weather have today? And aside from a little bit of wind, couldn't have been a whole lot better.
No, absolutely. It was ideal weather conditions. Most aggressive rider from the breakaway also had a throwdown with American Alex House from the Cannondale squad. But it's a Tour de France. If there's any chance that the Frenchman in the breakaway is aggressive, generally gets the most aggressive rider. So he'll wear that number tomorrow. He'll have the red number as the most aggressive rider from the previous stage. So nice little award for being out in the breakaway.
And think about that he lives 30 miles away from the finish line. And this guy's never going to buy a drink ever again in this hometown. I mean, well played. Well played.
I gotta ask. I mean, a number of people may be wondering. I am. How exactly is the most aggressive rider determined? How do they figure that out?
There's a committee. A couple of ex-pros are on there. A couple of journalists and the race jury. And they have a meeting at the end of the race and they discuss. I don't know if there's a vote, but they do come to a consensus and give out the most aggressive rider. So it's a small committee. Bernard Hinault, the man he just passed, is a member of that also. So I have a feeling that the preponderance of people on that committee are from France. Is that the politically expedient way to say that?
Well put. Well put.
And just a reminder, just within the last 20 or 25 minutes, the finish of stage one here at Utah Beach. Mark Cavendish with his 27th stage win, which means tomorrow, for the very first time in his career, he will wear the yellow jersey. Marcel Kittel came in second. Peter Sagan was third. If you've been with us for the last 15 or 20 minutes and also for the close of the race, you saw the massive crash, or didn't involve a lot of people, but it did look pretty scary, the crash inside that final kilometer. And Alexander Kristoff was involved just after the race. He spent time with us.
Alexander, take me through the sprint and those final few K.
It was very hectic, and I lost my teammates there in the end. I think it was a crash also, maybe. I was lucky not to be in there. I managed to come around, but at the end I came on Kittel's wheel, but I had nothing left.
How nervous were the riders coming into town and with about 10K to go with the wind and everything on the first day?
Yeah, I was nervous at the end there, and I did not really manage to come to the front at the end, so I had okay position, but I had to take some wind to get there.
Losada, his teammate, crashes right here.
Oh, mercy. Wow. Spoke about that earlier. I think that's Dylan Groenewegen, the sprinter who's the champion of the Netherlands, slowed down by that, didn't go down. But that's when you're going 70 kilometers an hour and you hit the deck, it's absolutely brutal. And that's just a part of modern cycling. And guys are so close going so quickly, the reaction time is much, much longer. And so any deviation along the line has a domino effect. And when you're on the receiving end of that, it's very, very tough to stay upright.
And not to mention, to explain those barriers are a straight barrier, but then on the bottom, there's a bit of a foot that comes out, and that encroaches into the road just that little bit. And if you touch that, especially at the speeds that they're going today, you're going down. I mean, 70, 75K an hour, 45, 50 miles an hour, yeah, you're going down quickly.
And that's the last thing you're thinking about at that moment. You're down in the drops, you're sprinting flat out, you're going as hard as you can. And at that speed, you're almost elevated up off of the ground. So anything that disrupts your momentum there is very hard to maintain your balance. And that's what we saw. And that rider went down hard. And it'll be a miracle if he starts tomorrow. I mean, these are tough men. They don't look like tough guys. They're very, very skinny. Like, they're some of the slightest athletes in the world. But they're so tenacious. And the Tour de France asks no quarter. No quarter is given. And if you can't start the next day, you're done. And there's no substitutions either.
Another big name we saw with a chance down to the finish was Andre Greipel, and just moments ago, he spent time with Jenna Corrado.
Disappointing finish, not the way you wanted to end, but can you explain what happened within those last 200 meters?
Well, it was not about the last 200 meters. I was really far back, and with 500 or 600 meters to go, there were people lying over the fence, and it was just so dangerous with the old fences, and the feet were on the road. So I think the ASO or the Tour de France has to change something for us, for our safety, to put the new fences which are not straight, and the people are far away off the road. So I think this was really bad circumstances, as the team did a really good job, and disappointing finish for us.
Christian, your response to what you heard from him?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. That's exactly what I just said. I went out there with a tape measure actually this morning, and I measured how wide it actually was from foot to foot, and it measured 5.6 meters, and I think it should at least be 6 meters. And so when the regular meter, the last 500 meters, there's regular barriers that go all the way down to the ground, and there's no feet, which Andre was alluding to. Those feet take up another foot back into the road. They could easily put that off the road, and that would have given that foot and a half back, and maybe this crash would have happened. I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened, but it's already dangerous. We don't need to make it any more dangerous. So these are kind of things we're trying to work out right now. I mean, it's been a dangerous sport. Crashes are happening too frequently, and like Andre is saying, just let's think heads up. Let's try to not make this happen tomorrow.
Bob?
Yeah, absolutely. And the riders can suggest things, and we can see these images on TV, the traffic furniture, the motorcycles throughout the day. I mean, how many times did we say, oh, look out? And the moto's just coming right by the riders. And the strength of the union needs to be fortified so that the riders, when they say something, especially when it affects their health and well-being and safety, something gets done. It's not just lip service. And oftentimes that's the case with professional cycling. And it's sad to see a rider go down so hard it's not necessary. So we'll see. We'll see what they do about it. This will be the interesting thing. That somebody crashed is not a surprise. Mm-hmm. But the reason why, we have to look at that and do something about it immediately.
You mentioned it went down hard. It was scary to watch at full speed. If you didn't see it, we take a look again at Losada. And this is as they approach the final kilometer here, sprinting to the finish. And Christian, how fast would you say they're going right here?
I mean, I know that I was going 60K an hour by myself behind the car, so I'm thinking at least 42, 45 miles an hour. I mean, think about yourself when you're driving down the road tomorrow, and you just jump out of the car at 45 miles an hour and jump into a barrier, and you have a styrofoam cap on and pretty much your underwear.
Wow.
But yeah, we hope that Losada's okay for tomorrow and can take the start.
All right, we'll see how healthy he is or he isn't heading in to tomorrow's stage 2 that will end up the road at Cherbourg. We saw a crash earlier that wasn't as severe as that, but involved one of the biggest names to many, one of the big three, Alberto Contador, crashed about between 60 and 70 miles in, stayed down for just a little bit, got back up. But if you saw the race, he was cut up pretty severely on his shoulder and also down around his hip. His team did come back and get him and bring him back into, I don't want to say contention, but he was there in the peloton later.
It's just a little bit curious. He's very close to the front, a situation that the peloton faces every mile of every bike race. His teammate is leading the peloton through that corner, and Alberto just miscalculated that corner, or the riders around him bounced into him, and that's something that's very tough to prevent. He's in perfect position. He's following his teammates. He's staying out of trouble near the front of the bike race, and still crashes. That is horrible, horrible bad luck. And it's because somebody, whether it was Alberto or not, was not paying attention just for one moment. Hits that traffic furniture, that island, and goes down really, really hard. Bike change shortly thereafter, and spent quite a bit of time after he caught back up to the main field at the doctor's car, getting his wounds dressed so he could finish up the stage. We presume
even changing shoes.
He must have broke his shoe on that crash that he went down so hard. So takes the insole out to switch to his spare pair of shoes, helped all the way by his teammates. So he didn't expend an inordinate amount of money, energy, the amount of energy that would preclude him from winning the Tour de France. But he does definitely start tomorrow on the back foot with at least the loss of some skin. And let's hope that it's not more severe than just the road rash.
But you're right. I mean, this is the days of marginal gains. And if you're starting off the tour on day one with road rash, you're not sleeping so well because you're rolling over and you're sticking to the sheets. I mean, these are not the things that you want on day one. I mean, you don't want it ever, let alone today.
And Alberto Contador said in the days leading up to this race, the weeks and months that his entire season was set up to be at his best in the Tour de France. Here's some numbers to keep in mind with the pictures you see. Again, this crash in between the 60 and 70 mile mark here of a 117 mile stage one. Finished 85th. Not as important as the fact that he's 55 seconds back and also 23 seconds behind Chris Froome. What do those numbers mean to you?
Well, it depends on when it happened. If it was in the crosswinds before the finish, which I don't think, I did not see that, and it's because of the crash, then that was within 3 kilometers to go. He'll be given the same time as Mark Cavendish, the stage winner. And so that's the preliminary results. The final results, when we get those, when they put it all together, I think he'll have the same time as the stage winner, which all of our GC contenders were able to do today.
Yeah, I think they'll all have the same time going into tomorrow. It's a matter of what he's going to be like tomorrow if he bounces back. I mean, how sore he's going to be. And a lot of times the body inflames that first day, and you're okay the day right after. It's a second day. That's the real test to say, oh boy, you wake up on Monday. Tomorrow you wake up, I'm not so bad. Monday morning, ooh. Yeah. These are the kind of things when things they're poking their ugly heads up.
Luke Rowe was a rider involved in that crash with Alberto Contador, and he talked to Steve Schlanger after the race.
Luke, you were involved with the crash and Alberto Contador. Tell me from your perspective what happened.
It was just quite a nervous moment in the race, and I was a couple of wheels behind Alberto, and he went around a right-hand bend, and his wheels just went from under him, and he slid out, unfortunately. And I was a couple of wheels behind him. I had nowhere to go, and I just nailed him. I had nowhere to go, so went flying over the top. So yeah, it's just a racing incident, and I'm okay. He was pretty ripped up, so I genuinely hope he's okay. But yeah, I'm fine. So live to fight another day.
How about your team leader, Chris Froome? Business as usual for him?
Yeah, I think we're pretty happy with it. You know, we stayed on the same time. He pretty, stress-free day as possible for him. He just, it's a case of not physically too demanding for him, just staying in our wheels and having confidence that we'll do the job. And yeah, but he's looking good.
I know he's an opponent, but Mark Cavendish is also your good friend. What do you think about his victory?
Well, he's an opponent, but he's not really, because we're not here for the sprints and he's only here for the sprints. So I'm ecstatic for him. I couldn't have asked for a nicer guy to win. He's genuinely a great guy. So if you asked me if I had to pick a winner, it probably would be him.
One more look at the crash. Alberto Contador, as a result, 55 seconds off the lead and 23 seconds behind Chris Froome.
You know, a lot of times you come into a corner like that not expecting that island to be there. So you're coming through a corner completely relaxed, and the last second you see it because you're so tight that the rider in front of you is blocking your vision coming into this corner with this traffic island right there in the middle. So last second you see it, he grabbed a little break, boom, you could crash right away. But I didn't realize that Luke Rowe had run into him too. I mean, Luke Rowe is not a small man, Paul. He is a big boy. So that just adds insult to injury. That's rough.
Is that anything that his team could have helped him prevent that crash?
He was right on the wheel. Tosada was leading through the corner. It was a perfect scenario. And I have to agree with you. You do not want Luke Rowe plowing into you, falling on top of you. That would hurt. That would add insult to injury.
But no, as far as the team goes, they were doing everything right. That was textbook. They had a team all around him. He was the top 10 guys going through the corner. I mean, what else can you really do? I mean, this is just part of racing. This is part of the stress of the first week.
One of his teammates, Michael Volger, saw the race, and here's what he had to say about it right after.
Michael, you were right behind Alberto Contador. Tell me what happened with the crash.
Well, just before there was this crosswind section, so we were very alert, and in the front. And we were actually in top 5 when it happens. And it's like a left-right-hand corner, but in the right-hand corner is like this intersection in the middle. And he didn't see that, and then he just touched the rear brake a bit too much, and the bike slid under him.
Did he communicate with you guys after the crash how he was doing?
Yeah, he was fine. Of course, he lost some skin, but I think he's pretty all right. He got a quick bike change, and we got him back pretty easily. But of course, it was a big stress at the time.
Yeah, what was the immediate thought when you guys realized what happened? Because you're in a good position. It's the first day of the tour. You don't expect that.
No, especially not in the front. If in the back, it happens. But I was already thinking, now this, sorry the language, like this Tour de France is over with the GC, but because it was a nasty crash, we came fast. But luckily, I think he's pretty all right. His elbow is a bit swollen up, but he should be fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Should be fine. Is that what you expect?
Believe me, that's the last thing you want your teammate to say about you at the end of a race. You want him to say everything went great, nobody fell down, no flat tires, we had the same time as the stage winner, no drama. That's not going to be the conversation for Tinkoff tonight.
No, not at all. I mean, but back to what we were saying before. It's sometimes it's unavoidable. I mean, of course, everything could be avoided, but they were doing everything right. They're at the front in the crosswind. That was hairy. You saw some guys getting dropped before that, a couple crashes. They're up at the front, completely protected. Some things happen, especially with those traffic islands, and especially in the north here. The same thing's going to be happening tomorrow. So this is just what's going to come yet again tomorrow.
All right, tomorrow, Stage 2 ends up in Cherbourg, has a bit of a climb, an interesting finish for Stage 2. If you're wondering about Chris Froome, the man who won the Tour last year and also has won 2 of the last 3, didn't expect at all to be close to the finish or close to winning today. He did finish in 25th place, 33 seconds off the pace. We'll talk about his day in just a bit, but first, here's his teammate, Geraint Thomas of Team Sky, with Steve Schlanger after the race.
Well, Geraint, first of all, I know that you had a bike issue midway through the race. Tell me what happened.
There was a crash on a corner just after a bit of a crosswind section and a lot of stress. And there's Contador and one of our boys came down, Luke Rowe. And I just came up to it fast and kind of went on the left, tried to jump over the curb and clip my back wheel and punch it. So I kind of had to wait for a wheel and stuff, but that was okay. And luckily, Luke's all right. Contador seemed okay. He was pretty cut up, though, so I'm sure you'll feel that for a while. Then, obviously, there was a big crash just then. Got caught up in that as well, so hopefully that's all my luck out of the way now for first day.
What did you see in that crash with Contador?
Not too much, really. It was just, like I say, a lot of stress and kind of went into that roundabout really quick, and I think he must have just made a bit of gravel or something and slid out. That's just guessing, but, yeah, that's what I think happened.
And how good are you feeling today with Wales winning at the Euro here in France?
Yeah, that was obviously great to watch last night, and it took a while to get off to sleep with all the adrenaline. But obviously the boys are going really well, so it's great to have that to watch in the evenings.
Thanks very much.
Cheers, thanks.
You guys both talked a lot, Bob. I remember you especially praising Team Sky and how strong it was around Chris Froome. I know we were keeping our eye on the sprint at the finish, but did you notice anything from Team Sky and how they did for Chris Froome today?
Well, you saw Vasil Kirienka right there with the sprinters teams doing an incredible amount of work. That's what they have to do. And they have Luke Rowe, they have Kiri, Vasil Kirienka and Ian Stannard. They'll be doing that for the foreseeable future. They will still have plenty of work to do throughout the Tour de France, but they rode perfectly today.
Yeah, they didn't even have to call on Stannard one time. I mean, it was mostly I saw Kirienka and Luke Rowe, and I didn't see Luke Rowe obviously after he crashed, but I mean, Ian Stannard's a Mack truck, and when they call on him, he could do the work of 10 men. So these guys have a strong team. We've been talking about this since we came on air this morning. Sky has the best team here. I mean, from head to toe, they could do what they want to do on the flats. They could do what they want to do in the crosswinds, the downhills, the uphills, you name it. They got a great team here.
The winner of the sprint to finish, Mark Cavendish, the main story here at the end of stage one, but always the subplot of the GC guys and how they did on the flat stages. Chris Froome, Quintana, Richie Porte, Fabio Aru, and Alberto Contador. We talked about him at length after the crash he went through between 60 and 70 minutes. What stands out to you there?
They're all packed in about the same time frame. I have a feeling that they're going to correct this, and it's going to reflect the crash that was in a kilometer or so before the finish line. And so there's a 3-kilometer rule. If they split the field because of that, and as a result of that, that's a disaster. Warren Barguil, he would get a 30-second advantage for, being heads up and finishing in the top 20 on the stage, and that would be pretty massive.
No, I don't think there's any drama. I think after you pass that threshold, everyone was together through that 3-kilometer threshold. That crash happened within a kilometer, even with almost 500 meters before the actual barriers happened. So, no, I think everyone's going to get the same time. Most of those guys, as long as I'm aware, they are. And I saw Alberto Contador talking and completely relaxed, actually, to Chris Froome coming across the finish line.
Thinking back about 5 or 6 hours now, late this morning here in France, talking about in the pre-race show about one of the main stories heading into that, not only this day, but really this entire Tour de France for the 103rd time. Team BMC, the dynamics between Richie Porte and TJ Van Garderen, they're saying all along they're going to equally support both guys. Are you reading anything into the fact that Richie Porte, we saw his name there, 42 seconds back, while TJ Van Garderen 13 seconds behind him?
Like I said, until they adjust the times to reflect the crash, if they keep these times, that would be big. I mean, TJ would be 30 seconds ahead of his teammates on day one just because he got around the crash. And I don't think it would change their tactics moving forward. They would still protect the two riders. For Team BMC, we almost never mentioned their name. We didn't see them. That's good news.
I agree. I think that's great news. I think a lot of times we would always see them bumping and fighting for the front. This day, they were sitting back a little bit. They weren't so far back, but they were one or two teams farther back than they usually would be. And I think they're saving everything for that last third week. Everyone knows here that this is a climber's race. That last 4 days in the Alps is going to be horrific. You need to keep everything completely in the holster until we get there. Keep out of trouble. We saw TJ in the back. He was completely protected by his teammates. They dropped back there. So if there's any question if they're going to let TJ out to dry, no, that's not the case. They went back there, helped him back into the peloton, made sure he's back up the front.
The day, though, with all that drama going on, can't forget it belongs to Mark Cavendish, 31 years old. He'll wear the yellow tomorrow for the very first time. He, for the 27th time, won a stage that happened just a little while ago. And after he won that yellow jersey, he spent a little time with our Steve Schlanger.
Mark, let's start with this yellow jersey. You said earlier that it's obviously a tremendous moment for you. Who did you think of first when you realized you'd be in yellow?
I don't know. I wanted to see my teammates first and foremost. They took a while to cross the line. Mark Renshaw was first, but there was Reinhard Jans van Rensburg, Edvard Wassenhagen and Bernie Eisel did an excellent job for us, tremendous. And I just wanted to see them, and only really got to see Mark there, So that's the first one, and then my family, they were here. My wife Peter's here with my 3 kids, and I've tried, especially with Delilah. She's been there at both times, wanted me to try for the yellow jersey, and finally I could get her them flowers. She's not happy with me unless I give her some flowers. That means I haven't done very well, so I got to give some flowers today, and she's going to be happy. So.
Did you ever think that maybe this day wouldn't come?
Really? It's a silly question, really. Riding my bike, I don't. It's indifferent if it comes or not. I'm absolutely honoured to wear the yellow jersey, but base my whole career on trying to win yellow. I want to win stages. It's hard to win a stage wherever, and So I don't really think about it like that, no.
Your team isn't just any team. Explain the significance of the yellow jersey for your squad.
You know, we ride for more than a cause. You know, Dimension Date is a team that it's the first team on the world tour from the continent of Africa. You know, and we're much more than about just representing sponsors, ride for a cause. You know, we want to get 5,000 kids on bicycles in Africa through the Quebecer charity, and that's 50% of what we do. You know, and there's no bigger way to raise awareness for this cause than by wearing the most iconic symbol in cycling, which is the yellow jersey. So it's a big day for us. You know, it's the team's first year up in World Tour. The lads did incredible last year. Steve Cummins won on Nelson Mandela Day, and to raise the profile of cycling the African continent, you know, this has been a big thing. So I'm super happy. You know, it's a big project I believed in to move here this year. Team's been super you know, behind me with everything, and to be able to put this team, put the continent of Africa on the map, you know, that's a big thing for us today.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
He's calm and at ease there in the yellow jersey for the first time. Guys, it was anything but calm in the sprint to the finish.
No, this jump that he puts in, Sagan had a great chance here, but look at this acceleration. Edward Toons on his wheel, just no reaction whatsoever. Launches straight past Marcel Kittel. That almost never happens. When Kittel gets up to full speed to be able to come around him, that is as good as it gets. That's a brilliant stage win by Mark Cavendish. He's been training for the track, and his top-end speed is as good as it's ever been in his career, and that was a stunning win. Every time you count Cavendish out, he punishes you. So I am going to admonish myself for the foreseeable future and remember this day for a very long time, and I'm sure he and his teammates will also.
Good to see the emotion there from Mark Cavendish, and also interesting to hear a number of the riders afterward to smile and speak well of Cavendish at 31 years old, earning that yellow jersey for the very first time. As Bob pointed out, the man who can say, I almost won that yellow is Marcel Kittel. He finished second. Here he is with Jenna Corrado after the race.
Marcel, you waited 2 years for this day to come, and you put in a big effort to the very end. Can you explain what happened in the closing kilometers?
Yeah, it was a big fight in the last 5. Every team wanted to be there. Even GC teams tried to be in the last kilometer in front. I have to say, my boys, they did a great lead out. They did a really good job in trying to keep me in front. Unfortunately, we chose the wrong side. Oh, not the wrong side, but we had to start the sprint on the left side. I had to go really early, and yeah, that made a difference today, because Mark could sit a little bit longer in the wheel of someone else and then start his sprint. And as soon as he starts to go, when you are a little bit early in the wind already, there is no chance to keep up with him. It's normal.
Extreme disappointment or optimistic for what's ahead?
Yeah, of course, I'm disappointed. I mean, it was my goal to win today. Unfortunately, it didn't work, but we started now the tour with a second place, close to the first. The team worked well, everyone is strong. So with 20 stages to go, I think there are some more chances.
What'd you learn there, Bob, from the man who finished second today?
You could hear the disappointment when Jenna asked him about losing, and I think he'll use that to motivate himself for the stages to come, but probably not have a chance at the yellow jersey this year in the Tour de France. His teammates, Edix, did an absolutely stunning lead out. They were very powerful, and I think when they get it perfect, he's going to be very tough to beat still.
And Bob mentioned the stages. I'm going to go from plural to singular here. Look ahead to just one, that's stage 2. St. Lo to Cherbourg tomorrow, guys. What do you see?
I see a sting in the tail that might see a change in the yellow jersey. Cat 4 climbs, very similar to today's stage. There's a few more of them, and there's a Cat 3 before the finish line. And the pure sprinters, the Greipels, the Cavendishes, and the Kittles are going to have a tough time staying in the front. And I think we'll see a different type of sprinter, perhaps the third-place rider on today's stage, Peter Sagan, having enough resistance, having enough power and speed to get up over that climb with the leaders and then still do well in the sprint. So we could see a change in yellow.
I think we will 100% see a stage in yellow or change in the yellow jersey. I actually rode this a couple of days ago, and that is not an easy climb whatsoever. So I like you said, I think we might see the guy who we saw in third place today taking that yellow jersey tomorrow.
Is it relatively flat, though, as we saw leading into that finals?
It's going to be a lot like today. It's really bumpy for the most part, and it's going to be windy again. It might be raining, so it's just the elements. It's all these things. So up here in the north of France, we have the traffic islands, and we're going to see some of the crashes like we saw here today. So it's everything tomorrow. So it's the best rider gets to the bottom there in good place.
Best rider today at age 31, going to wear yellow tomorrow for the very first time. Mark Cavendish in first, Marcel Kittel was second, and Peter Sagan third. Tonight, NBCSports.com for continuing coverage of the 103rd Tour de France. Our wardrobe has been provided by Kraft Sportswear. For our entire crew, thanks for being with us here. We are at the finish here, Utah Beach, the close of stage one, won by Mark Cavendish. I'm Paul Burmeister saying so long from Utah Beach.